causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. Reverently I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time, and I rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain unto the end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of all others to the great enlightenment. Now we'll offer a short mandala offering. We'll offer this twice, once in Tibetan and then once in English. So a mandala offering is the visualization of the entire universe. Here is described according to Indian cosmology. But what we do is we visualize the entire universe and we purify it in our thoughts so it's free from all stains and all defects. And we offer it in its entirety to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas on behalf of all sentient beings, that all sentient beings might enjoy the blissful, pure land that we have created out of the universe. And at the beginning of a teaching, we offer a mandala like this as a request for the teaching. So on the student's part of offering mandala is to request a teaching. And we also offer mandala to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to request their blessings. So on the student's part, you offer both to the teacher as well as to all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas for those two purposes, both to request teachings and to request all the blessings of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. 사시프기 죽심해도 트람리람링시 니댕겐파인디 사행계신두 미테와이 조근나마다신라 스펄쇼. This ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field, and I offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Kurana Mandalakam Niryatayami. And so, in addition, we'll offer praise to Shakyamuni Buddha, this prayer. And then after this, we'll offer the Heart Sutra. So, at the beginning of any Dharma activity, you want to set your motivation. And then to help secure that motivation, you want to recognize that the goal of achieving Buddhahood requires both method or skillful means, which in this case is compassion and bodhicitta and all the activities that go along with that, as well as wisdom, right? The recognition and understanding of the nature of reality. We have to complete these two collections. And so, regardless of whatever Dharma activity we're doing, in the beginning, we like to um, cultivate a relationship with both of those aspects. And so the prayers that we offer at the beginning of class helps us not only make our motivation more firm, not only helps us prepare our mind to receive a teaching, but it also connects us to these two aspects of the path. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings. To you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shaka clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings. To you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shaki clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings. To you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shaka clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When, O supreme amongst humans, you were born on this earth, you paced out 7 strides, and then said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise then, I prostrate. With pure bodies, forms supremely pure, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, Lord, to you I prostrate. With supreme signs, face like spotless moon, color like gold, to you I prostrate. Dust free like you, the 3 worlds are not. Incomparably wise one, to you I prostrate. The Savior having great compassion, the Founder having all understanding, the field of merit with qualities like a vast ocean, to you, the one gone to thusness, I prostrate. The purity that frees one from attachment, the virtue that frees one from the lower realms, the one path, the sublime, pure reality, to the Dharma that pacifies, I prostrate. Those who are liberated and who also show the path to liberation, the holy field qualified with realizations, who are devoted to the moral precepts, to you, the sublime community intending virtue, I prostrate. Homage to the Supreme Buddha, homage to the Dharma refuge, homage to the great Sangha, to all 3 ever devout homage, to all worthy of respect, bowing with bodies as many as all realms atoms in all aspects, with supreme faith I pay homage. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions, subdue your mind thoroughly, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a visual aberration, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew or a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through these merits may sentient beings attain the rank of all-seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from samsara's ocean where they are perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. And we will continue with the Heart Sutra, one of the most condensed teachings on emptiness that we have from the Buddha. The most extremely condensed teaching on emptiness is just the syllable ah, but you know, that's not doesn't do as much for our minds. So we need a little bit more elaboration than just the syllable ah. That's the most condensed teaching on emptiness. So this is the Heart Sutra, which is the condensed version. There is uh, the Perfection Sutras exist in 8,000 lines, 25,000 lines, or 100,000 lines, right? So this is the short of those, the essence. I prostrate to the Arya triple gem. Thus did I hear at one time. The Bhagwan was dwelling on massive Vulture's Mountain and Rajagriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagwan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya, Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya, Avalokiteshvara. How should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya, Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Sharadvatiputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty. Emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomena. There is no I element, and so on, up to and including no mind element, and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the endpoint of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance upon the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as the truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared, Tayata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhi Swaha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagawan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that. It is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as you have indicated, and even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagawan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Sharadvatiputra and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, as well as those surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that which had been spoken by the Bhagawan. And lastly, we'll offer a brief prayer to help avert hindrances and obstacles to our teaching together today. And this is prayer to line-faced Dakini. I prostrate to the gathering of Dakinis and the three chakras who abide in the holy yoga of using space. By your powers of clairvoyance and magical emanation, look after practitioners like a mother her child. Aka samartha shadara samaraya pe, aka samartha shadara samaya 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 pe. Aka samartha shadara samaraya pe, tayata om gate gate paragate parasamgate bodhi swaha. By the teachings of the truth of the supreme jewels possessing the power of truth, may inner and outer hindrances be transformed. May they be dispelled. May they be pacified. Shintam Kuriye Swaha. May all negative forces opposed to Dharma be completely pacified. May the host of 80,000 obstacles be pacified. And may we be separated from problems and harmful conditions to the Dharma. May all enjoyments be in accord with the Dharma. And may there be auspiciousness and perfect happiness here, right now. Great. Thank you so much. So as we begin our class today, I'll remind everyone that you're welcome to ask questions whenever you need. There'll be time at the end dedicated to questions, but if something I say warrants a question, you're welcome to interrupt me. I may not see if you raise your hand, so you can go ahead and just ask a question as you need, but try to keep them on topic. And if it feels a little ancillary, then maybe just save it until the end, and we'll have time at the end. So as we begin our class, and we begin digging into this text a little more, let's try to maintain the three attitudes that we should always adopt whenever we approach a Dharma teaching, or not a Dharma teaching, a Dharma practice, right? And those three attitudes, we want to adopt a long-term attitude or the big picture attitude, right? This is the attitude that realizes that our goal is long way away, right? Our goal is to become Buddhas. Our goal isn't just to have happiness in this life. It's not just to have relaxation. It's not to have a good day. Our goal is to become Buddhas. So we need to take this long-term approach or the big picture approach to realize that our goal is not an immediate goal, but a long-term goal. So we have to be in it for the long haul, right? And that's going to have ups and downs. It's not always going to be easy. And there are times when it's going to be blissful and perfect and really exciting, right? That's what it means to be in a long-term practice. So the recognition that our Dharma practice is not a sprint, but it is a marathon or an ultra marathon at that, right? So we want to adopt the long-term goal or the big picture goal. That's the attitude we want to adopt, rather. The second one is what we call the expansive attitude, right? The attitude that recognizes that not only is this practice one that is going to be long term, but is one that has many different parts and pieces. Okay. It is not as simple as one specific thing we can recite over and over again. Okay. There are lots of different things we have to meditate on. There's lots of different obstacles we have to overcome. There's lots of different things we have to learn and practice. So, in that way, it's expansive. It's not only long, but it's also wide. And we have to recognize that we have to utilize all of these different tools and practices together in concert to achieve our goals. And then, in addition, once we've kind of overwhelmed ourselves by adopting the attitude that says, okay, I'm in it for the long haul, and we've adopted the attitude that says, okay, there's so many different things I have to learn, then we adopt what we know as the relaxed attitude. And this is the attitude that recognizes that yes, Buddhahood is a long way away. And yes, there are many different aspects of the path that we have to study and put into practice, but we can't be uptight about any of them. Okay, we have to have a relaxed attitude that says, I'm going to take every day as it comes. I'm always going to work towards Buddhahood to the best of my ability, but I'm also not going to hold myself up to an unrealistic expectation because that won't serve me and it won't allow me to serve other sentient beings. So I have to balance the recognition that this is a difficult path and also balance the recognition that samsara is a hard place to live and I'm doing the best I can. So I have to have that balance. And that is what we call the relaxed attitude. Okay, so whenever we engage in a Dharma practice, which is to say, every practice we do throughout our lives, whether it appears worldly or not, we should always cultivate these three attitudes. That our goal of Buddhahood requires us to have a big picture or a long term attitude. That to get there, the path there is multivaried or multivarious rather. There are many different steps and many different processes, many different things we have to learn and practice. So the expansive attitude. And then we have to have the relaxed attitude that allows us to hold those other two attitudes without being too tight, without being too stressed out, basically. Okay. So let's try to breathe deep and adopt those three attitudes. Now, as for those who have attended my classes over the last couple of years, you'll know that we used to have a habit at CKSL of pausing about two-thirds of the way through the class to meditation. And my loquacity, my inability to not talk a whole lot, has made it difficult for that meditation to happen. So let's start with a brief meditation today. And that way we have time to do it. And I'm going to start with the meditation that I really enjoy at the beginning of any practice. And I did this last week for those who joined us last week as well. And this is a 9-round meditation, a 9-round breath meditation. The reason I like this practice is because, the most common practice we do, the practice that we introduce as a way of meditating is focusing on the breath, right? Because we need to have single pointed concentration that allows us to calm our mind, that allows us to observe what's going on in our mind, what's going on around us. And so focusing on the breath as a starting point is a really useful way to start building up that muscle. But sometimes, especially if you're coming from a very frantic life, that just jumping into meditation and focusing on the breath, it can feel a little bit difficult, right? So the 9-round breathing meditation is a little more active. When you focus on the breath, you're supposed to allow your breath to fall into its natural rhythm. You're not forcing it. So it's passive in that way. Now your mind is always active, but the activity feels passive. The 9-round breathing is a little more active. It gives, at least me, it gives me more to sink my teeth into when I'm especially harried, right? When my mind is going everywhere, it's a little more helpful. So I thought we'd start with that today, just to really focus ourselves and to give ourselves a sense of calm and a sense of direction. So I'll explain the practice briefly, and then I won't describe it more as we go through. This comes from the tantric tradition, though it is appropriate to teach to everyone. Um, and so that's something to note. And as we do this practice, first we have to visualize what we call the central channels. So the central channels are part of our subtle body that are through which the subtle winds move that allow our thoughts to be expressed and to be understood within our body. So the central channel is the primary of our subtle channels, and we can picture it about the width of our pinky. It is blue in color, it's made of light. It exists right in front of our spine, running parallel to our spine. And we can picture it terminating about 4 finger widths below our navel. And then as it goes up, it curves, it follows the curve of our skull, and then the other end terminates right between our eyebrows. That is the central channel. that it glows a light blue in color. It is made of light. And then to either side of it are the right and the left channels. The right channel is red in color. The left channel is white in color. These both terminate at our nostrils, and then they go up and they join the central channel, and they run parallel to it on either side. And then, about 4 finger widths below the navel, they turn inward and they join into the central channel. So all 3 channels meet together at this place, just below your navel. And that is the visualization we'll do. And as we breathe, what we're going to do is we're going to be breathing in through one nostril and then out through the other nostril. And as we do that, we visualize the air, the breath coming in like white light, flowing down that channel, whichever nostril we breathe in, and sweeping the channel of all debris, making it so it is pliable, so it is unobstructed. And then as we breathe out, it'll go out the other channel. Okay. So what we'll do is hold our nostril closed, and we'll start by doing breathing in through the through the left nostril, and then breathing out through the right nostril. And we'll do that 3 times. And then we'll reverse that, and we will breathe in through the right nostril and breathe out through the left nostril. And we'll do that 3 times. Both nostrils, and we'll visualize that air as it enters and goes down our central channel, excuse me, our side channels. It enters into the central channel, and as we breathe out, we will visualize it being expelled through our central channel and clearing out our central channel as well. So in that way, we make our minds and the subtle channels of our body that are through which the subtle winds move. We purify them. We make them unobstructed. But also, for us, it gives us an opportunity to really focus on our meditation practice. So when we breathe in, we're going to be breathing in slowly. Then we'll hold the breath, and then we'll breathe out slowly, and then we'll hold on empty, right? So it gives us a little more to do. So let's do that together. So we start by breathing in the left, hold. Now breathe out through the right, hold empty. And now again, using your finger to block your nostril, breathe in through the left, breathe out through the right. One last time. Breathe in through the left. Breathe out through the right. And now breathe in through the right. Breathe out through the left. In through the right. Out through the left. One last time. In through the right. Out through the left. Now in through both. Out through the central. In through both. Out through the central channel. One last time. In through both. And out through the central channel. And now allow your breath to just fall into its natural rhythm. Allow your awareness to move from the breath to the space in front, to the room, to the screen, and to the practice we're about to study together. Great. Thank you. What I like to do for my practice, if I'm having an especially, hectic day, is that whatever meditation I do, I start with that because that gives me an anchor to get into my practice. And then generally, I'll then follow that with a little bit of just single point of concentration, whether it's on the breath or whether it is on an image of the Buddha or something like this, right? So I'll start with 9 round breathing, and then I'll go into single point of concentration, even for just a few moments. A mindfulness practice, we sometimes call it. And then whatever other meditations I'm doing that day, I will begin those. But I use that as my segue to kind of serve as the bardo, right? The stepping stone between my everyday life, which is running around in circles, as much as I don't want it to be, it still is, and my meditation practice, right? So I'm not just jumping in the deep end, I'm easing myself in a way that lets me get the most out of my practice. Because that's kind of the point of Dharma, right? The point of the teachings of the Buddha are to meet us where we are, you know, as our practice grows, as our practice deepens, as we understand more and we learn more and then put it into effect in our lives, our experience of the Dharma is going to change. The very same instruction that you get one day is going to be experienced differently on another day as your practice deepens, right? Because the Dharma meets us where we are. We we grow into our practice. And that's why at the beginning, when we haven't studied Dharma at all, when we're studying it for the first time, it can feel like a revelation, right? And then after that, it becomes more like work because we've already had that revelation moment and now we have to actually put it into practice. But then as we do that, then there are new little revelations that happen. We see the way our mind works. We see the way we react to things in new ways. Okay. And that's because the Dharma meets us where we are. Whatever obstacles we have, whatever difficulties we have going in our life, whatever uncommon circumstances we're experiencing, the Dharma is there. The Dharma is going to be there as we need it to be. Now, this doesn't mean that the Dharma has to be changed or watered down to meet our needs. That's a misunderstanding, I think. And a lot of people that are new to Buddhism want to modify the Dharma to meet my needs. Okay. The Dharma as it is isn't good enough for my 21st century Western mind. That is not true. The Dharma contains all we need to become Buddhas. So we're not changing the Dharma, but due to our practice, due to our realizations, due to our meditation, the Dharma that we receive is going to be different. So we're not changing the Dharma, we're changing our minds. Because that's the whole point of Dharma. Transform your mind. Okay. So as our circumstances change and our experience changes, we grow into deeper levels of understanding. And the Dharma is there waiting for us, showing us what the next step is for us to take. That's why, if there's a teaching happening and the teaching is on a topic you've already studied, it's still worthwhile that you attend that teaching because every time you attend it, you're going to learn something new about yourself and about your practice. You may be able to list all of the points, of the meditation that you know is coming. Or if we're talking about Lam Rim, maybe you can list all of the topics of Lam Rim. That's fine. Just because you have them memorized doesn't mean that you won't experience something different if you pick up that text again, or if you go to that teaching again, or if you receive that instruction a new time. So the Dharma is always going to meet us where we are, with whatever obstacles we're facing in our life, with whatever joys we have in our life. The Dharma is there to hold us. The Dharma, the word Dharma in Sanskrit, it comes from the verbal root dr, which means to hold something. So a dharma is something that is held. And of course, the word dharma is very vague. It can encompass everything. Everything that exists is a type of dharma. So here, when we say the Dharma, we're really talking about the teachings of the Buddha, right? Because Dharma also means law, it also means rules, and anything that exists is a type of Dharma. But here, when we're talking about Dharma, we mean the Buddha Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha. These are what are held. These are the ideas, the views, the philosophies, the practices that are held. But not only are they held, they hold us. Can they meet us where we are? And as we grow and evolve, the Dharma is waiting for us. We can't outgrow it. Okay? Now, the beauty of that is that a text like this we're studying, there's always something new to get out of this text. Right now, the chapter we're studying, chapter 5, is about how to study the mind and protect the mind through generating awareness or alertness, right? And by guarding alertness, what we're doing is protecting our mind because our mind is the source of all of our unhappiness as well as the source of all of our happiness. But if we aren't intentional about how we use our mind, then we're going to cling on to unhappiness and we're going to avoid happiness because due to conditioning from past lives and due to the ignorance that has caused us to cycle in samsara again and again, we don't have a clear understanding of what will bring about happiness in the long term and what will bring about suffering in the long term. And so if we want to be able to move in the right direction, we need to actually see what is our mind doing? Why is our mind attracted to one thing and not to another? What are the magnetizing forces that compel us to move in one direction or another? How is our mind running in circles? So in order to do that, we have to look at our mind. And introspection or alertness or awareness is one of the primary tools we have to do that, to ensure that all of our activities are following virtue. And by following virtue, what that really means is all of our activities are pointed towards happiness, short-term happiness and long-term happiness. That's the real important thing to remember is that when we say we need to avoid all non-virtue and adopt all virtues, what we mean by that is we have to embrace happiness and joy and avoid the opposite, avoid suffering. That's what it means. So when you think of something that is labeled as non-virtuous, you really should think of that thing as being the cause of suffering, right? It's not something that you want to do, but you are not allowed to do. Okay? That's not what it means. Non-virtue is itself suffering. Virtue is happiness, immediate happiness, long-term happiness. Once you have those associations, then it makes it much easier to realize why all of our actions should be pointed towards virtue. And so the Dharma teaches us how to do that. And as our practice grows, then you'll see there are more levels of how you go about doing that, how you go about analyzing your mind, how you go about using awareness and introspection as part of the path. So, for example, when we first start out, at first, all we're going to be doing is maybe identifying our gross reactionary emotions when they come, especially the bigger ones like anger and attachment, right? We won't notice the more subtle ones. We'll just notice those primary poisonous minds in their grossest, most extreme forms. And even that is a huge breakthrough because how many people live their lives without realizing that they're under the control of anger or attachment, right? They don't realize it and they act mindlessly, being controlled by these reactionary forces that are in their minds. So even just realizing that, wait a second, my mind right now is filled with anger and that's what is propelling me to act. Realizing that is a huge breakthrough and very, very difficult, actually. So that's the first step, though. And then after that, then the more we practice, then we won't only notice those gross emotions, but we'll notice the whole causal cascade that initiates them. So right now I am filled with anger, but where did that anger come from? Is that anger due to an external source, or is it due to the way I'm reacting to that external source? Is it due to the ego that I'm trying to protect that was threatened by this external source? Right? Where did that anger come from? So we see the whole cascade of causes that result in that anger. And then the more we practice, we then identify not only all of those causes that precipitate my generation of anger, that exist not only in the immediate circumstances, but in past lives as well. But then we see forward, what are all the subsequent results of that anger, right? What are the immediate results if I'm in a conversation with someone and I'm acting out of anger? But also, what are the long-term results? What kind of seeds am I planting? How am I creating the habit to just adopt anger again and again and again as a default mode of being? And what are the negative consequences of that in this life and in future lives? So the more we inspect our mind, we start seeing all of these at the same time. Not just the emotion, but all the things that precipitated it, both internal and external, and then all of the consequences of that emotion. And then as a result of that, we begin to identify our own subtle habits that we have been participating in without thought over and over and over again that lead us to grab onto anger as a reliable resource, or to believe that, incorrectly believe that, right? So we don't only see the causes, but we see how our own behavior brings those causes into light, and how our own mind is actually precipitating those causes. That it isn't anything external. The external things are merely the conditions that allow our mind to grab onto anger and to promote anger, or whatever the emotion may be. And then we begin to see, as we develop these levels of realization or understanding, we see how all of the different things that we're studying link together. So when you start understanding, you start by just seeing how your anger is occupying your mind and you weren't aware of it. And then you start seeing the causes. And then you start contemplating the results. And then you start seeing how that anger isn't really existing outside of you, but existing within you. And then you start seeing how that anger is related to karma, and how that anger is related to a misunderstanding of the nature of the perfect human rebirth, or a misunderstanding of the reality of death and impermanence. And how if you actually had understood those things, there'd be no place for anger, or your anger would be tempered. And then you start to see how the experience of suffering, both suffering in the lower realms and suffering of the upper realms, is what is definitely needs to be avoided. And your anger only creates greater levels of suffering, right? So you see all of the different elements of the teaching come together just through observing your mind and how your mind reacts to the world around you. But it doesn't happen instantly. As our understanding develops, then the Dharma is there to give us more, to hold us up, to always show us the next step to take on the path, to deepen our awareness. And the purpose of that isn't just to learn a lot of things. The purpose of that is to lead a life that is meaningful, to lead a life that experiences external obstacles but isn't overwhelmed by them, that experiences coarse suffering, that sees the suffering in the world around us, whether it's directly affecting us or not, and develops a mind that wants to eliminate that suffering. And it does so in such a way that our compassion and our love and our bodhicitta are what provide us the fuel to live a meaningful life in this world, no matter what obstacles we face, to always have a mind that is peaceful, even when it observes difficulty, to have a mind that isn't overwhelmed when the world is a chaotic place. That is what it means to then practice the Dharma. Just studying the Dharma isn't enough if we don't put it into practice. So the more we study, the more subtle understanding we have of our own mind. And the more subtle understanding we have of our own mind, the better we can actually do something about how we live in this world to cultivate an attitude of awareness, an attitude of happiness and joy, an attitude of contentment and peace. Because peace doesn't just happen. Contentment doesn't just happen. Okay, we need to transform our minds into the state of being that we want to be. So we need to work for a peaceful mind. We need to work for a content and happy mind. That doesn't just happen on its own. It never will. External or internal. Peace doesn't just happen. We have to work for it. Happiness doesn't just occur out of nowhere. We have to work for it. And the important thing, especially as Mahayana practitioners, is we recognize that we're not working for our own happiness in this life alone. We're working for the happiness of all sentient beings. And the truth is, by doing that, we experience happiness. We realize that by ourselves seeking out virtue, ourselves seeking to get rid of the mind that is self-cherishing, that says, my happiness is more important than yours, by doing that, we actually find contentment because we stop telling so many stories about our ego. We stop focusing the whole world on us. And by doing that, our suffering doesn't become overwhelming to us. We don't grasp onto it like it's the end of the world. And by focusing on others, by trying to make lives better for everyone around us in the immediate moment and in the future, what we're doing is allowing ourselves the space we need to be happy and content and to experience difficulties without letting them cause even greater suffering, without exacerbating our distress. So it's through the act of working for others, in whatever ways we have a bit available to us, that we find contentment and peace in our life. And in order to develop the techniques and the methods to work for others most efficiently, we have to observe our minds. So they all work together, right? And it's only through continued study, contemplation, and meditation that we can realize how all those pieces fit together. If we want happiness and contentment, what that goes to say is all those pieces, we have to recognize that they fall into these two categories that I mentioned earlier during when we were offering prayers. The method or skillful means, which is bodhicitta and all of the mental states and activities that accompany bodhicitta, the wish to become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings and relieve them of all suffering, and the wisdom that realizes the nature of reality or that realizes emptiness. So, wisdom and skillful means are these two collections that we have to complete. And so, all of our practices are going to fall into one of those two things. And we have to realize that they work together. Okay, wisdom and compassion are coterminous. They're like the two wings of a bird. They are always working together in concert, helping one another, helping us develop our minds. And the beauty of it is that the greater bodhicitta or compassion we develop, the less self-cherishing we have. And the greater wisdom we develop, the less self-grasping we have. And self-grasping and self-cherishing are what cause us to cycle in samsara again and again and experience suffering again and again. So by developing bodhicitta and by developing wisdom, we eliminate the causes that create our experiences of suffering. So we do what we can do, the best we can do. The more we study, then our parameters of what it means to do the best we can do is going to change, right? The deeper we meditate, the longer our practice goes on, then what that looks like in the real world is going to be different because our practice grows with us and the Dharma is there to meet us. So as we practice and study, we'll find a combination of some things that are very easy to apply to our lives. We'll find some teachings that are they seem very simple, very straightforward, very common sense. And we'll find other teachings that are very convoluted or philosophically difficult that takes a long time for us to understand. That's the way the Dharma goes. There are some things that are going to resonate with us right away. And you say, of course, that makes sense. And there are going to be other things that we have to struggle with, right? Whether it's because they're just difficult to understand at an intellectual level, or maybe we understand them, but they're difficult to apply to our lives, or some combination thereof, right? So as we practice, we can't let ourselves see these roadblocks as if they're obstacles. Instead, all they merely are speed bumps. They're something that we can overcome. And by overcoming them, our practice gets stronger. So the reason I bring that up is the section we're studying today is going to seem like a lot of very straightforward, easy advice. Okay? It's going to say, wait, why is this? What do we mean? This is the Dharma. This is just common advice. This is what it means to be a good person. That's true, right? But those two things aren't separate. And we have to recognize that just because a lot of the things we're going to be studying today might fall into common good advice or common sense for us, that doesn't mean that it falls into common sense for other people. I often something my sister reminds me often, we'll be having a conversation about something or other, and I'll say, well, I feel such and such a way. Then I almost always caveat it by saying, well, of course I feel that way. I'm a monk. That's why I feel that way. And she's like, or maybe you're a monk because you feel that way. Like the causality doesn't go in one direction, right? It's not because you practice Buddhism that you develop these type of mindsets or attitudes. The reason you're attracted to Buddhism is because you already have an inclination towards those mindsets or attitudes, right? So it's not all monodirectional. So some of these things that seem like common sense to us are the same reason we are attracted to Buddhism as a spiritual path because they make sense to us. And there are others who say those aren't important and those don't make any sense. And they may not be as attracted to Buddhism, or it may require more effort for them to see the benefit of these commonsensical activities or practices, right? So don't ever take common sense for granted. That's what I'm trying to get at. So this text, we're studying Shantideva's Bodhicharyavatara, the Bodhisattva's way of life. Shantideva is an incredible scholar from Nalanda Monastery from the 8th century in India. And this is his kind of magnum opus. There's only really 2 texts that we have from him, and this is one of them. And for anyone that is interested in studying or practicing Mahayana Buddhism, this text is critical. It's a critical text because it shows us what our minds should be like when we become bodhisattvas. And that includes practices that are very complicated and difficult that maybe we aren't able to embody right now, and other practices that are very easy. And so we have to find that balance of understanding. These are things I can do right now to the best of my ability, and these are things that I aspire to be able to do that I'll do as best as I can, recognizing that I'm not yet a bodhisattva, so I'm not going to meet that threshold yet, but I'm working towards it. And all of that is contained in this text. Now, when we talk about this text, the text teaches the breakdown of the text is the first 3 chapters teach us how to cultivate bodhicitta. So bodhicitta being the mind that aspires to become a Buddha in order to eliminate the suffering of all sentient beings. Those are the first 3 chapters. The next 3 chapters teach us how to protect that bodhicitta from degenerating. And then the final 3 chapters teach us how to increase that bodhicitta, right? What practices increase that mind. Now, across those 9 chapters, we also are taught the 6 perfected activities of a bodhisattva, what are known as the 6 paramitas. So the first one is generosity, and that is taught indirectly in chapters 2 and 3 when a 7-limb prayer practice is discussed, right? And then the next of the paramitas is morality or ethical discipline, and that is taught across chapters 4 and 5, when both of which are focused on how we tame our mind in different ways. And then the remaining of the 6 paramitas have their own chapter. So chapter 6 is on patience, chapter 7 is on joyful effort or diligence, chapter 8 is on concentration, and chapter 9 is on wisdom, right? So the remaining 4 paramitas each have their own uh, individual chapter. Then there is a final chapter in the text that is all a dedication. And that dedication, when you have completed a lengthy practice, that's a wonderful dedication to offer. We offer it at the monastery. It's called the dedication prayer from the Bodhicharyavatara. And it's just that last chapter, the 10th chapter, that we offer as a dedication prayer. It's a wonderful thing to offer. It's really beautiful. It's a little bit lengthy, right? So it's not something that we might do in every class here because I'm sure some students already think that the prayers go on too long as it is. But it is a really wonderful prayer to offer, and it's a great way to dedicate any merit you've accumulated and do so with a connection to the tradition, right? And it also doesn't really require any explanation. It's very, very clear, all the meaning of it. So that is the breakdown of the text. And right now, we are in the middle of the 5th chapter. So the 5th chapter, like we said, it's called Guarding Alertness. So alertness and awareness and introspection are all somewhat interchangeable translations of the term Sheishin in Tibetan. And it has to do with a type of mental factor that is always watching our mind. Watching our mind because we realize that our mind, like we said, can be our greatest enemy. This chapter starts out by identifying that a crazed elephant can only harm our body, but the wild elephant of our mind, if it isn't tamed, can cause us so much more suffering, right? So our mind can be our greatest enemy. That's the real foe that we have to defeat, is the unruly mind, the mind that is untamed. And it is through introspection that we're able to do that. Now, introspection doesn't actually tame the mind, right? What introspection does is it allows us to recognize that the mind is acting inappropriately, that the mind is seeking out something non-virtuous. So introspection is neutral, right? Introspection can notice that we are overwhelmed by anger, and then we just say, okay, that's fine, and do nothing about it. So introspection isn't the antidote in that regard. Introspection is allowing us to see what we need to do to improve our mind. And often introspection or alertness goes hand in hand with mindfulness. So mindfulness is the ability to stay focused on whatever object it is that we're meditating on. So if we're in meditation, our mindfulness is bringing us to our meditative object. But in everyday life, when we're not actively meditating, our mindfulness should still be, it's a mental factor that should be focused on virtue. Right. So the way these work together is in all of our daily activities, we want to be focused on virtue to make virtuous activity being the guiding light that allows us to know if what we're doing is appropriate or not. And then our introspection is always checking, am I following virtue or am I following non-virtue? Right? So those two work together. One, the analogy which is given in this text and in others is that if our mind is a wild elephant that's out of control that you need to tame, then the post sunk in the ground in the middle of the training ground is like whatever object it is that you're focusing on, in this case, virtue. The rope that ties the elephant to that post is like the mindfulness that is keeping the elephant within a certain parameter. And then the hook, the iron hook that you use to kind of poke the elephant, is what is causing the elephant to follow the behavior that you want it to follow, right? So that hook is our introspection, the rope is the mindfulness, and then the pole that the rope is tied to is whatever it is that we are trying to pursue, in this case, virtuous activity. So that is the analogy. And as we said, these chapters are teaching us the perfected activity of morality, right? Or ethical discipline. And so, in brief, we talked about how there are essentially 3 types of ethical discipline. The first one is the most common one. When you think of ethical discipline, this is what you think of. It's called the discipline or the morality of restraint. So restraining from engaging in non-virtue. That's the first type of ethical discipline. Ethical discipline and morality are synonymous, right? So that's the first type. And we had a whole section of this text so far teaching us about how to go about practicing, how to go about using introspection to practice the morality of restraint. The other two types of morality that are discussed is the morality of collecting virtuous activity or accomplishing virtue, and the morality of working for the welfare of other sentient beings. So those are also types of ethical discipline, right? So ethical discipline or morality isn't just not doing negative action, but it's also actively seeking out virtuous activity. Both of those are types of morality. And so now we are on verse 71, which begins the section that is teaching us how to be skillful in accomplishing virtue or collecting virtue. And like I said, these are going to seem very commonsensical. That's great. If this is common sense to you, that means you're already moving in the right direction, right? So verse 71 reminds us, now, while there is freedom to act, I should always present a smiling face and cease to frown and look angry. I should be a friend and a counsel of the world, right? What this is reminding us is that when we are engaging with other sentient beings, we want to project to them an honesty that is rooted in happiness, right? So you know that when you meet someone, if they're frowning or grimacing right away, it's going to set you on edge. But if they're smiling and it seems genuine and it doesn't seem like they're trying to manipulate you, but they're genuinely happy to be in that space, then that makes you comfortable. That makes you at ease. And that makes you happy as well. And so we need to be that for the world. In all of our interactions, we want to be making others happy, right? We want to be eliminating their suffering. And yes, our goal is to eliminate all of their suffering from samsara, not just their immediate worldly suffering. That's true. But that doesn't preclude eliminating their immediate suffering. So just bringing a full sense of genuine happiness and calm and comfort to all of your interactions totally transforms them. Doesn't matter if you're dealing with your family or your friends or your students or your coworkers or your boss or the rickshaw driver, whoever it is that you're navigating. If you bring a sense of calm, relaxation, happiness, you want to be their friend and their counsel, right? If you want to do that in genuine, right? This isn't just a performance. This isn't just trying to win them over. You genuinely bring about the mind that says, I want you to be happy. And therefore, I am going to reflect that happiness back at you. I want you not to suffer. If that is your mindset that precedes every single interaction you have with everyone, and right now we're talking about interactions with humans, but this goes for any sentient being, then that is going to transform how you relate to them, and that's going to allow them the opportunity to experience happiness in a more profound way. And we know this from our experience, right? We know that when we deal with someone, um, just having a smile on your face can make a big difference, right? Think of going to the store and you're dealing with someone at the checkout counter who has been there for hours and hours and hours, and they're grumpy and they're miserable. All of a sudden, you had so much fun going shopping, picking out your meals for the week, doing all this work, and then you get to the checkout counter and this person is miserable and like ignoring you or on their phone and this, and you get grumpy. You say, "Come on now," like it ruins your whole day. Yeah, if they smile at you and they're nice to you, then you feel great. It's that simple thing, right? So, like I said, this is like the advice our parents taught us. You be nice to people. Just be nice to people. And that it's not, revolutionary. And yeah, it is revolutionary because it's not our instinct as sentient beings. Maybe your instinct, if you were trained well and you had a good upbringing, but for most of us, it isn't. Most of us, our instinct says, I want me to be happy. So that's what I'm going to focus on. And the fact that I'm smiling is not for your benefit, but because it's for my benefit. That is the instinct. And we need to turn that around and say, no, I'm smiling because I want you to experience happiness. And I recognize this is a small way I can do that. And I don't want you to experience more suffering. And the important part is that we're not putting on a show. We have to actually bring a genuine sense of happiness with us. That's the important part. We're not fabricating. Okay. And now it may be difficult sometimes. We may be experiencing a lot of obstacles. And in those cases, we do have to sometimes fake it until we make it a little bit, right? But the whole point is that we're not trying to pull one over. We're not trying to manipulate people. That is the important part. Now, continuing. I should desist from inconsiderately and noisily moving around chairs and so forth, as well as from violently opening doors, and I should always delight in humility. Again, when you're around other people, you be considerate of their needs. If anyone has ever lived in an apartment building, or never mind that, if you've lived with other people, right? Whether it be family or friends, you know that sometimes the slightest noise can totally set you off or can totally set them off, you know? And so this is just saying, when I'm around others, I want to be considerate of their needs. I want to recognize that there are things that if I'm acting mindlessly, if I'm not being mindful of how I exist in space, then I can cause obstacles for others. And it's true. If they were perfectly realized beings, or if they had any sense of, meditative practice, then maybe they wouldn't be upset by that. Sure. But that's not my responsibility. Their level of practice and development and realization is not my responsibility. My responsibility is making as conducive a condition as I can for all sentient beings to experience happiness and delight and not be overwhelmed by any sensory experiences that may cause them distress. That's my responsibility. My responsibility is to create as best conditions as possible for other sentient beings to be calm, peaceful, and happy. And I should do that with humility. I should delight in humility. I think this is really an important part of this verse as well. In the same way that the last one is saying, I want to be a friend and a counsel to the world, then that has to be genuine, right? And this, when I am trying to recognize how I exist in space and how I exist in relation to the world around me and trying to be considerate of others' needs, it's not simply because um, I don't want them to think poorly of me. It's because I want to adopt a mind of humility that recognizes their happiness and their well-being is important, right? And I should delight in that. It should make me joyful to be able to practice humility in that way. Okay, we'll move on because this is, again, doesn't take too much commentary. Next, the stork, the cat, and the thief, by moving silently and carefully, accomplish what they desire to do. A bodhisattva, too, should always behave in this way. Let me tell you, cats do not get any love in Indian or Buddhist or Indian or Tibetan text here. You know, cats are often described as being two-faced. You want to avoid being like a cat because they're duplicitous. But here, what Shantideva is pointing out is that all three of these, the stork, the cat, and the thief, act in such a way that is filled with stillness and silence. And what they're doing is they are preying on animals, right? They're hunting or they're trying to steal. But in order to do that, they have to be very mindful of their actions. So a stork will stand in the water perfectly still to allow whatever fish that it is hunting to come and swim and be right near them before they dive their head in to eat those fish, right? And in the same way, a cat will be perfectly still and hide in the grass, letting whatever mice or whatever insects or whatever birds it's waiting for to get within closing distance. It'll be so still that the other animals won't see it, and then it pounces. So it is able to apply patience and it's able to see a long-term goal and to recognize that it requires some sort of mindfulness and attentiveness in order to achieve that goal. And in the same way, a thief who doesn't want to be caught will be quiet, will be aware of every single footstep that they take, because that is how they can go about their nefarious activity without being caught. So we shouldn't share their motivations, right? We shouldn't share the attitude of wanting to hunt others or to steal from others, but we should recognize that they are adopting these characteristics that we can adopt, and we should use them with a virtuous mind. So we should be moving silently and carefully. We should be very attentive to everything we do because we recognize that if we are in community with others, then our actions affect them. And so I want all my actions to be done intentionally, not accidentally. Um, what's important too is to recognize that the the power of our action isn't related to the external display of our action, if that makes sense. So what I mean by that is for an action to be powerful doesn't mean it has to be filled with bravado. It doesn't have to be showy. It doesn't have to be extravagant. It can be the quieter, slower movement and activities that then actually have a profound effect on people and a profound effect in your life. And we even know that like doing something considerately and slowly and intentionally often yields a better result than rushing into something, right? Without paying attention to all the different possible pitfalls. So here, this is reminding us that if our goal is to practice this virtuous activity, or practice the morality rather, of gathering virtue, then the way we do that is by being very aware of our actions and the way our actions are affecting the others around us, and therefore making our actions to be imbued with a sense of calm, a sense of happiness, a sense of intentionality, and not frantic, wild, noisy disruption, right? With respect, I should gratefully accept unsought after words that are of benefit and that wisely advise and admonish me. At all times, I should be the pupil of everyone. So this can be difficult, right? If we want to achieve Buddhahood, then we need to subdue all of our actions of body, speech, and mind. And it's easy to accept advice if it's advice that we have asked for, or if it's advice that is coming from a teacher, right? Or if it's advice that is given in good faith. Those are generally easy to accept, even if they're pointing out something we don't want to look at. But when the advice is unasked for, it's just given, or when the advice is coming from a peer or even someone who is lower than us, whatever that might mean, or when the advice is not given in good faith, but in bad faith, that doesn't mean it's not good advice, right? If someone is able to point out one of our flaws, point out a way we are behaving that is not healthy or not helpful, that is always something we should be aware of. And so whenever anyone is able to offer me advice, whether I ask for it or not, whether they doing it in good faith or not, because they care about me or because they care about showing off, what it doesn't matter. If it is useful advice, I should accept it. And I should realize that if my actions warrant being advised in that way, then I need to be more reflective of my actions. And that way I can be a pupil of everyone. Because the way other people relate to me gives me an opportunity to see what they think of me. And if I can understand what they think of me, gives me a chance to see how I exist in the world. That my opinion of myself and my beliefs about how I relate to those around me may not be the way others experience me. Right? Now, I'll never be able to get into your minds. I'll never be able to know what you actually experience when you're with me. But by observing you and by observing the way you react to me, by observing the advice you give me, then I'm able to learn something about myself. Right. Now, that isn't to say that we always need to change. It may be that others are reacting out of their own wrong views or whatever, but we should always be aware of what we can learn about ourselves by seeing how others react to us, and we should take it into consideration. And when people give us advice, even if it's advice we didn't ask for, even if it's coming from someone who we don't like, who is mean, who for whatever reason just gets on our nerves, it doesn't mean it's bad advice. We should always take advice to heart. And one of the things this does, in addition to helping us overcome harmful behavior or potentially harmful behavior, is it also reminds us that there's no place on the path to Buddhahood for our ego or for our pride. Neither of those are going to propel us forward towards Buddhahood. If our goal is to work for sentient beings, if our goal is to be a servant to all sentient beings to eliminate their suffering, then ego and pride have no role to play in that. And if we can take the advice from someone that we respect, but we can't take the advice from someone we don't respect, even if it's the same advice, then the reason for that isn't because of the advice, it's because of our egos, right? And therefore, it is showing how the ego and that pride, that arrogance, gets in the way of following virtuous behavior, potentially, right? So we need to eliminate our ego. We need to eliminate pride. We need to eliminate the mind that says, I know more than these other people, and be willing to accept advice or an admonition when we're able to realize that it's helpful to us. Now, that doesn't mean that every single critique someone gives of us is correct, right? People may critique us because they're just misinformed, or they may just be wrong, right? So I'm not saying if someone criticizes you right away, you should change your whole lifestyle to meet the needs of whatever criticism it is. But you should at least listen to it, and you should contemplate, is what they're saying reflecting reality? Do I really behave in such a way that does that? I think the hardest one for me is to find out when you've been doing something that is causing someone else harm or distress or emotional distress that you don't realize, because if your intention is not to ever harm anyone in any meaningful way, right? And you find out that you've been doing something that you thought was helpful, but they were experiencing it as harmful, then that's not advice that you want to hear often. It can be very difficult to hear that advice because it goes so against your intention that you can't say, nope, they're just misinterpreting things. That's the first reaction, right? Because you want to protect yourself. And you say, no, I'm a good person. I'm trying to be a good person. I'm doing the best I can. That's the hardest advice to hear. Sometimes it's the most important advice. Now, sometimes you may be doing the right thing and people are going to experience it in their own way. And there may be nothing you need to change, right? I'm not saying, again, every time someone criticizes you, you should take it and follow it, but you should consider it. That's the important part. I'll take it to heart and I'll recognize that every single other sentient being can be a teacher to me because in them, even if they're not giving me direct advice, they are offering an opportunity for me to see how they experience me. And that is important because then I learn something about myself. I can, at least. And continuing in that same vein of being willing to accept the advice of others or take it to heart and consider how we exist in the world, we need to encourage others to be engaging in positive activities, to be following virtue. So when others do something well, we should celebrate it, right? Now, we often say that it's much more useful to identify a single fault in your own behavior than it is to identify 1,000 faults in others, right? The analogy they all often give is if faults are like grains of sand, then the faults of others are like grains of sand in your hand, and the faults of yourself are like grains of sand in your eye. A single grain of sand in your eye is going to be much more distressful than a whole handful of sand, right? So it's much more useful for you as you progress in the path and as you deepen your practice and as you work towards finding peace, contentment, happiness in this life to see the own ways that you are making mistakes on the path than it is for you to see the ways other people are making mistakes. Right. Now, that isn't to say that you can't offer criticism when it's asked for and when it will be helpful and when it will be received correctly. But your goal is not to be criticizing others, but to be watching your own mind. However, when you observe people following virtue, when you observe someone doing something well, you should praise them. You should compliment them because that encourages them to continue seeking out virtue. Right. So verse 75 tells us, I should say well said to all of those who speak the Dharma well. And if I see someone doing good, I should praise them and be well pleased. This reminds us that not only are we praising them for their benefit, to encourage them to continue seeking out virtue, to continue explaining the Dharma to others, to continue having meaningful conversations about what it means to live a spiritual life. Not only should I be encouraging them through praise when appropriate, but also I should be well pleased that they are seeking out virtue. When I see someone following virtue, engaging in healthy behavior, that should make me happy. And that's the essence of what we call rejoicing, right? Rejoicing is generating a mind of joy at virtue or in relationship to virtue or virtuous activity. So rejoicing doesn't mean that I rejoice only in my own good deeds, but whenever I see anyone following virtue, I should feel joy as a result of that. Okay? And because of that, what that does is it trains my mind to be familiar with virtue, to seek out virtue, and it correlates happiness and joy with virtuous activity. So rejoicing primes me to always seek out virtue. And so not just in myself, but in others as well.
Venerable, can I ask you a question, please?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Venerable, this is regarding um, unsolicited advice. I am in a situation where my mother's home, we moved my mother out of our home, and that home is not really livable. There is a lot of work to be done to that house if it has to sustain itself and give it up to somebody to live in, which I cannot do right now. It's a lot of work, expense, everything. But I have lots of people who keep giving me advice on what I need to do about it. I do get
Mm-hmm.
affected. They either tell me or my sibling or how to go about it. So I don't know. I'm like, I'll
Mm-hmm.
do what I can, what I should. So please give me some advice
Yeah.
on how to handle it because I see it coming at me all the time. Thank you.
So the problem is you receiving too much advice, and therefore you want my advice about what to do with too much advice. Um, so what this is pointing to, this verse specifically, is advice regarding our own behavior, right? So that's the first thing to notice is that it's a little bit different. Saying how to go about what advice to do with these worldly things is not the same, or not quite the same. But what to do, regardless, the way to approach it is the same. When there is an experience in your life and all these people are giving you advice, and often that advice is conflicting, the important thing that this verse is reminding us is to not dismiss people's advice just because they're giving it unwarranted and unasked for, and because they are doing it maybe out of their own ego. To just dismiss it as saying not helpful because I didn't ask for it or because you're a jerk is not the way to go about doing things. But so you listen to their advice and you say, is there merit in this? Is this the right way for me to go forward? Now you're in a situation where you have to make some practical advice. It's not about how you exist in the world, but about a thing, right? What to do with this house and what to do with this situation. So there are going to be some ways that are easier and some that are harder, depending on your circumstances, depending on what you have available to you in terms of resources. So all you can do, unfortunately, I would say, is when people give you advice, and it sounds like most of this is unsolicited, is that you're willing to listen to it and consider it. But then at the end of the day, you're the only one that knows your situation as best as knows your situation best. So you know what resources you have available to you in terms of both physical resources, but more importantly, emotional resources, right? And you know what you have the capacity to do at this time and how one piece of advice may be the best advice in theory, but it's not going to work for you, right? So unfortunately, all you can do is I'd say don't dismiss the advice, whatever it may be. Don't dismiss it out of hand. Consider it, but then don't be indebted to any particular advice. Realize that you're the only one that knows your situation and your mother's situation and is able to navigate what is the best thing to do. So it's not easy, unfortunately. You know, this specific verse is more talking about when we get advice that is about our behavior and about the way we treat others or the way we speak or the way we act and so forth. So if I'm acting in such a way that's loud and rude and someone calls me out on it, then this is what this is kind of pointing to. But it's the same theory. Whenever I'm given advice, I should consider it regardless of the source. And I should be grateful that someone is giving me advice, even if it's not advice that I asked for, even if it's not advice I'm going to use particularly, especially if you're receiving conflicting advice from people, you can't use all of them, right? So you should be grateful that people are giving advice, and then you have to decide what's the best way forward. And sometimes you recognize that you aren't able to do the best. And so, as an example, um, I've spoken before. I had a similar situation when I was caring for my mother when she was in her dying process, and I was back in the States caring for her. And my sister and brother were helping as well, but they have families and full-time jobs, so I was able to take a couple weeks break from the monastery to go care for her and serve as her full-time caregiver. And my sister and I both knew that there was different types of kind of emotional labor that we needed to do to deal with the fact that our mother was dying, that we didn't have the bandwidth to do at that time because there are too many everyday realities that we had to take care of, that we had to take care of her physical well-being, her emotional well-being, right? To take care of her finances, take care of her apartment, to take care of all of these things. So our own kind of emotional labor and introspection we had to do, we kind of were putting it off. And we knew this isn't even the healthiest way to go about doing this, but we don't have enough resources to do everything simultaneously. So we have to say, what are the resources we have? And how can we use them in the most efficient way to be of greatest service, in that case, to our mother, because that's who we were serving at that moment. So I didn't have the resources available to do everything perfectly. I knew that. But I had the resources to do the best I could. And I recognized that there are some things I'm neglecting for now, and I'm going to have to deal with them later, but I'm doing that willingly. I'm not doing it out of ignorance and I'm not doing it blindly. I'm recognizing that I don't have enough resources to be perfect. So I'm going to do the best I can and I'll deal with these other obstacles when I have the emotional ability to do so, or the mental or the physical or whatever it may be. So we have to find that balance of saying, what can I do that's the best for me right now in this circumstance? I hope that's a little helpful.
Yeah, because I mean that is something you're dealing internally, right? This
Yeah.
is considered. But there are these arrows coming from all directions. Everybody tells you what you should be doing instead of, yeah. That's
Yeah,
that's
unfortunately, you have to find that balance of trying to develop a mind of gratitude for people giving you advice, even if you didn't ask for that advice, and even if they're not giving it in good faith. That's the difficult thing. As it says, I should learn to be a pupil of everyone, right? So when people are giving advice from your side, you say, okay, they're giving me advice, and I'm going to accept that advice from them or listen to that advice, hear it as if they really were caring about my well-being and not just showing off that they think they know what's best, right? So that's a mental activity that you're doing, regardless of their intention. Okay. Because that's the only way to guard yourself from that advice. The only other option then would be to put up a wall to totally ignore everything, right? Which isn't a way to be in community. So you have to try to find that balance of hearing their advice, analyzing it, and saying, is this useful? If not, okay, I'm not going to follow it. Like if people are just giving you advice and it's not useful, then you can put it down. And if that means they're going to criticize you for not following their advice, there's nothing you can do about that. But you've heard their advice, you know your situation, and you're able to say that their advice may be useful, but not for me right now in this time in this place, given what is going on in my life and in this circumstance. So, but to tell people don't give me advice at all, I don't want to hear it, it's not going to be helpful insofar as it's just going to anger them because they're convinced that their advice is right. And it is not going to actually be useful to you because there may be utility in some of their advice. So letting them give advice, actually analyzing it and saying, is there anything useful in this? Can I apply this in any meaningful way? And then what isn't useful, letting it go and letting their words that they insist they know more than you maybe or that they know what's best for the situation, that's fine, right? Those words come like arrows, and that's fine. You can just let them go. They can fall at your feet. They don't have to pierce you. The words just come and they fall at your feet. And then you can go through them and say, are any of these useful or are they not? And if they're not useful, you leave them where they are. And if they're useful, you pick them up and you use them, right? So you have to kind of adopt it that way. And it's difficult, especially when there's multiple people convinced they know what's best. And not only are they giving you advice, I'm sure, I mean, I don't know your specific circumstance, but usually not only are they giving you advice, they're criticizing you at the same time, right? Which makes it even harder because it feels like you think I'm a bad child or I'm not doing things correctly. And so your advice is implicit with your advice is a critique of me as a being, as a human being, or as a child, or as a whatever it may be, as a sibling, as a partner, as whatever. Um, that may be true from their side, that they may be intending to critique you. But that's what we have to remember that it's only our self-cherishing mind that can ever be harmed by others' critiques of us, right? Especially unfounded critiques. It's only the mind that says that I need to be protected from all discomfort and that I have to be existing in all levels of comfort and praise and compliment that is harmed when I am critiqued. Otherwise, all it is words. And if all it is empty words, and I yet have an emotional reaction to those words, where is that emotional reaction coming from? Is that emotional reaction coming for because I actually believe that about myself, or is it coming because I don't think they have a right to say that to me? And either of those healthy ways to be engaging in the world, right? So when you feel like you are being actually critiqued and it is causing you to be distressed or angry, never mind the actual physical things you have to do with the house and these kind of things. If you feel like there's critique against you as a person, you say, what is being critiqued here? Is it me or is it my self-cherishing mind? What is reacting to this criticism? And it's what's reacting is the part of my mind that says, I don't deserve to be criticized. I deserve to be praised. I don't want to experience discomfort. I want to experience happiness. That is what is causing distress. The self-cherishing mind that is experiencing their critique and taking it personally, and not instead looking at it for what it is, which is empty words that don't have any meaning on your sense of mind or your presence of mind. So you can try to break those two things apart. The advice, the actual practical advice, like there is a problem that needs to be solved. The problem being what to do with this house and what to do with all of these things. That is a physical problem that you need to navigate. But at the same time, so you can take that advice and analyze it and say what's the best. And then the critique, the criticism, the infamy that is coming with those simultaneous with that advice, you look at that and you say that isn't doing anything. Those are just words. I don't have to let them pierce me because all they can do is harm my self-cherishing. They can't harm my mind or my happiness. My mind and happiness come from me, right? My happiness comes from me. It doesn't come from them. My sense of calm comes from me. My sense of peace and contentment and relaxation comes from my own mind. Those are just external conditions that I'm able to overcome if I'm able to calm my mind and realize that not self-cherishing doesn't do anything but perpetuate suffering for myself and others.
It's kind of a paradox in terms of self-cherishing and self-abandonment. If I'm looking at
Yeah.
all their advice, saying, they're saying it for my good. I feel like it's a little contradictory to me. Yeah, I understand in the larger picture. Yes.
Mm. Um, so self-abandonment doesn't mean ignoring your own needs. It means recognizing that what I need to be content and happy is never going to be something that exists outside of me. What I need to find peace and contentment and joy in this life is never going to exist outside of me. I already have everything I need. And so I'm not abandoning myself when I am abandoning the self-cherishing mind. What I'm abandoning is my clinging on to suffering as if it were happiness. And that's hard to recognize because our habit is the opposite. Our habit is to recognize or assume that the things outside of us are what bring us happiness and what bring us suffering, right? We think that these things are external to us, but they're not. Our happiness and our suffering come from inside. Those are just the external things are just the conditions that allows our mind to cultivate one or the other. And so um, abandoning self-cherishing is not a self-abandonment. What it actually does is it nourishing the self, right? So abandoning self-cherishing goes hand in hand with um, adopting a mind, what we call definite emergence. So a mind of renunciation, a mind that is renouncing suffering, a mind that is renouncing clinging on to samsara as if it were going to bring me happiness. And so that's an important thing to recognize that by abandoning self-cherishing, what I'm doing is actually securing myself in happiness because self-cherishing is nothing but suffering. So that is kind of the hope or the ideal. Let's move on a little bit. If there are more questions in this regard, maybe sometime at the end, like me. Otherwise, we can talk about it privately,
Thank
but I don't want to,
you.
I want to continue a little bit, if that's okay. So continuing, right. So we compliment others when they are successful and when they do something that is virtuous, right? So that's where we ended on verse 75. Verse 76 says, I should discreetly talk about the good qualities of others and repeat that those that others recount. If my own good qualities are spoken about, I should just know and be aware that I have them. This is an important thing to think about. So first off, the importance of praising others, but here it says discreetly, right? And so what that means is that it's more important to praise others when they are not in your presence than it is when they are in your presence. In part because you want to make sure that your praise and your compliments aren't performative, that you aren't trying to win them over, you aren't trying to curry favor from them, right? And you aren't fishing for them to return your compliment. So, in that regard, when you're discreet about giving out praise, it's important that you're praising people when they're not there. That's most important. And if other people speak about the good qualities of someone else, of a third party, you should agree if you recognize those good qualities. You should add to the celebration of virtue whenever you can. Now, sometimes it's useful to praise someone directly, to share your appreciation for their good qualities. But you should do so in such a way that makes it clear that both from your side and from their side, that you aren't seeking out, you aren't fishing for a compliment, that you aren't doing it just to puff up their ego, that you are genuinely overjoyed by their good qualities and you want to share that with them, especially if it's not a good quality that they necessarily see in themselves or that they recognize. Then if you think that praising them can be helpful, then you should go ahead and do it. But as we say, and as the next two lines remind us, praise is not something we should be seeking for ourselves. And if we're not careful, it's very easy for us to cling to praise as if it has some sort of substantial reality. And all of a sudden, our actions are motivated by seeking out praise. So we should never cling to praise. And if people praise us, then it's worthwhile to look at that praise and say, is this genuine? Right? Is not, excuse me, not genuine. If someone praises us, we should say, is this valid? Like, do I actually embody these qualities that they are praising me for? And if it is valid, then you can appreciate, okay, I'm doing something well. But you shouldn't allow that to feed your ego. You shouldn't then boast about it. You shouldn't say, oh, you're right. I do that really well. Thank you for noticing how good I am at X, Y, and Z. Right? So when others give you praise, it's a good opportunity for you to analyze, do I really live up to this praise they're giving me? And if I do, then I celebrate that. I can rejoice in my own accomplishments. And if I don't, then what do I need to do to live up to the praise that they're giving me? What are the afflictions I still have that are causing obstacles? You know, if someone gives me a compliment and says, "Oh, you're so kind whenever you meet new people," am I really, or am I judging them and trying to be performatively kind? They don't know that, but I know. So then I look and I say, "Am I really kind? Am I helpful? Am I all these things? Am I patient? Am I all these things that I may be praised for? Or am I just seeking out praise and am I acting in such a way that might invite praise?" Only I know that. So when you receive praise, you should always look at it from a distance and should never celebrate praise that is given to you. But it can be a good opportunity for you to actually say, am I worthy of this? One of the as a monk, we often um are given monks and nuns, any ordained people are sought out all the time because as an ordained person, we are objects of merit. What that means is um, people can accumulate merit by making offerings to us in a greater capacity than they can to lay people. And the reason is, hypothetically, a monk or a nun has more vows, and if you keep your vows purely, then you become an object of merit, right? Conceptually speaking, whether or not you keep your vows purely, only you know that. But so because of that, the monastery receives offerings, and we receive offerings. Those offerings are done under the auspice that we are living in our vows purely. And so whenever you receive those offerings, there are many texts in the Vinaya and similar texts from the Buddha that say those offerings that you receive, if you're not actually keeping your vows purely, but you take those offerings, it's like the molten copper of hell that you're pouring into your begging bowl, right? Because you are not living up to the expectations that others have of you. So it's the same way when people praise any of your good qualities. It's not quite the same, but you should have the same mindset. Am I living up to these good qualities that they recognize in me? And if I'm not, what do I have to do to live up to them? That is important. Always working to improve your mind to the best of your ability and not celebrating your own good qualities, but celebrating others' good qualities in such a way that encourages others. We have to remember, right? The whole point of our lives is to benefit others. So we have to train ourselves to be happy at others' success. When others succeed, we should be happy, right? When others do something that is virtuous or beneficial, that should make us happy, even if it doesn't affect us directly. By training ourselves to always find delight in virtue, then that makes all virtuous activity easier. It makes it a habit. It gets rid of our past habits that are seeking out my own personal happiness and instead is seeking out virtue, which is the happiness of all sentient beings. And in the process, we improve our life. That's again, the irony is that the more you dedicate yourself to seeking out others' happiness, the happier you are going to be in your life. The easier it is for you to find happiness and calm. The more you stop focusing on your own happiness, the more you stop focusing on accumulating more and more and more, me, the more you do that, you stop focusing on that, the happier you are. The more you dedicate yourself to caring about others, the happier and more content you are by default because you've stopped obsessing about all the things that you need to grasp onto. Okay, let's try to get through a few more verses as we continue today. Um, verse 77 and 78 go together. All deeds of others are the source of joy that would be rare even if it could be bought with money. Therefore, I should be happy in finding this joy in the good things that are done by others. Through doing this, I shall suffer no losses in this life, and in the future lives I shall find great happiness. But the fault of disliking the good qualities will make me, now and in future lives, find great suffering. It'll make me, make me unhappy and miserable, and in future lives I'll find great suffering. Sorry, we don't have the text is cut off here. Um, so again, I should develop a mind. All of the actions of body, speech, and mind of a bodhisattva, right? We're trying to be bodhisattvas. This text is teaching us how to be bodhisattvas. And part of a bodhisattva's practice is the practice of morality, the morality of gathering virtue. All of the actions of a bodhisattva's body, speech, and mind are designed or done with the intent to bring about the happiness of other sentient beings. The immediate happiness and the long-term happiness both. Okay? The ultimate and the temporal happiness, we say. Every single activity a Buddha does, every single action of body, speech, and mind is designed to bring about others' short-term and long-term happiness. And therefore, when others do things that are representations of joy or representations of virtue, that should be something we should be happy about because that means that all of our actions are um, bearing fruit to some degree, right? we should be excited and to find joy in others' joy. That's the kind of short version of it. And this kind of joy is not something that can be bought. So when others engage in beneficial activity, the joy that I can develop from seeing others succeed is not a type of joy or happiness that you can buy. And I think this is actually really easy to think about. If you have someone who's very, very close to you, whether it be a family member, child, or a loved one, when they succeed, it makes you happy, right? When you see your kid win that game, that sports game, or hit that home run, right? You feel happy for them. And their happiness makes you feel happy. Not because they won an award, not because of anything like that, but because they're happy. Their success and their happiness at their own success makes you happy. And that is not a kind of happiness that you can buy. It only comes from having a relationship with others that recognizes that their joy feeds into your own joy. Their happiness, their success is a source of joy for you. And so it's easy with people we love, with people we care about, when they have success to feel joyful. What we have to do, what we need to strive to do, is to have that same experience with all sentient beings. Whenever we see anyone experiencing joy, especially joy that is born from virtuous activity, that should then cause us to feel joy. Whenever we see anyone engaging in beneficial activities, in virtuous activities, even if they don't affect us in any way, that should allow us to feel joy. That should not, excuse me, not allow us, precipitate our own feeling of joy. We should allow ourselves to be excited in the good activities of others, because that type of joy is not something you can just fabricate. It's something you develop. You can't buy it. It's not for sale. Seeing others' success, finding delight in their success, is one of the most powerful ways that you can then promote your own activities of virtue, and you can help affect those around you to follow virtue as well. Because you've created a habit of virtue and joy being simultaneous and interconnected all the time. And the truth is, as it goes on in 78, if I celebrate whenever you win, that is not going to, whether when someone else wins something, I can celebrate it or I can begrudge them. Neither of those are going to change my experience, my life, right? Or whether I receive that thing or not. I'm not going to accumulate more loss because I have celebrated their win. And in fact, if I don't celebrate their joys, their success, all I'm doing is priming myself to be unhappy in this life and in future lives. If I see someone engaging in virtue, even if, or I see someone celebrating a success, even a success that I wanted but wasn't able to achieve myself, right? So I see them succeeding in a way that I'm not able to succeed yet. If I see that and I celebrate it, all it does is it provides me the opportunity to continue working towards that success for myself. If I'm miserable, that doesn't change the fact that I haven't succeeded. It doesn't change the fact that they've succeeded. That misery, that unhappiness, that grumpiness doesn't change the reality. All it does is it makes my life unhappy. And it sets me up to not succeed in the future because unhappiness only precipitates more unhappiness. It doesn't precipitate success. It doesn't cost me anything to be happy for you when you succeed, right? Which is a very selfish way to think about it, but it's true. It doesn't cost me anything to be happy when I see you succeeding. So why would I not do it? So this is Shantideva's advice. We should be happy when others succeed because it benefits us and it benefits them. So let's continue with verse 79. This section, um, how to be skilled in the morality of engaging virtue, goes on through verse 83. So at the bare minimum, I'd like to complete this section today. Let's see if I'm able to accomplish that. When talking, I should speak from my heart and on what is relevant. Make the meaning clear, make the speech pleasing. I should not speak out of desire or hatred, but I should speak in gentle tones and in moderation. Again, this feels like common sense. I should be honest, I should be open, and I should do so in such a way that is constantly avoiding the non-virtuous activities of speech, right? So that means be aware of what is motivating my speech, be aware of why I'm saying what I'm saying, but then also be aware of how I'm saying it, who my audience is, how they're going to receive it. Now, I don't know other people's minds, so I can't guarantee that I'll know how people will receive what I say, but I have some sense of how I can say a thing to make it well received, right? And so I should always be checking my motivation, make sure that my goal is to be honest, to be open, and to be beneficial, not to be spiteful, not to show how I know more than someone, not to show that I'm better at something, not to inflate my ego, but instead be honest and be open. And then be aware of others' needs to the best I can. Be aware of the context to the best I can. And the truth is, this is talking about how we speak more around others. So the previous verses were how we act around others, right? Being quiet, being considerate, recognizing our sense of space, and then recognizing our minds when we're around others. And here is also saying how we should recognize our activities of speech around others. Because the whole point of introspection is to be aware of our activities of body, speech, and mind and what is motivating them. So here, this is talking about an activity of speech and how that can affect ourselves and affect others. But this applies to all of our life, right? All of our activities, we should try to be honest and open. That honesty and openness is profoundly moving. Think of when you've been in community with someone and you could tell that maybe they didn't have the answer for you. Maybe they couldn't solve whatever problem you went to them with, but their honesty and their openness made you want to spend time with them. It made you want to listen to their advice. It made you want to just be in their presence. Even if they didn't have the answer for you, just being honest and open allowed them to cultivate a way of being that made you want to be near them. That's what we need to be for other sentient beings in all, not just our speech, but in our way of being as well, in our the way we exist, right? The way we occupy space. We have to be honest. We have to be open. We have to be receptive. Um, I can think of most of my teachers. Now, most of my teachers, not most, many of my teachers are a little bit intimidating just because they're so impressive, and so being around them can be intimidating sometimes, right? In that regard, that I'm a little bit overwhelmed by how amazing their practice and their realizations are. But that comes from my side. From their side, they're always so open and accepting and inviting. They want you to be there so you can learn, so you can improve, so you can study, right? I think of um, the past Trudar Rinpoche, so Trizar Rinpoche, the previous head of the Gelugpa lineage. So he's called the Trizar Rinpoche. He's currently at Sarah, where he stays. And we had some ceremonies last week, earlier this week, and our abbot is ill, so our abbot wasn't able to attend. So he attended in place of the abbot. And just seeing him sitting on the throne, there were Geshe Damjas. So there were some monks that were receiving their Geshe degree because they'd completed their studies. And he sat on a throne to observe them as they went through these final ceremonies. Just his presence, the way he exists in the world. He didn't say anything, right? He wasn't speaking, he wasn't critiquing, he wasn't giving advice. He was just sitting there observing. The way he sits and observes is a joy to be around. It makes you feel like he's holding you, right? And so you know this experience with people that are able to cultivate a sense of openness, a sense of reciprocity, a sense of calm and peace and ingenuity. They just radiate that, right? So hopefully in your life you've met people like that, whether it be your teachers or your loved ones, maybe it was a family member, who knows? That is what we need to adopt in our own lives. We need to be that sense of comfort for others. We need to be the calm in a storm because what is samsara except a storm, right? It is chaos. So we need to be that life post or that life raft that people are able to cling to when everything is difficult. And by doing so, we don't just improve their lives, we improve our lives. Because the way we become that is by taming our mind. The way we become that is by getting rid of the mind that says my happiness is most important. That's how we become that source of peace and calm and joy for others. We become that sense of relaxation for others, of openness, of invitedness. We do that by taming our mind. We do that by seeking out virtuous activity, by avoiding non-virtue. That is how we can become the calm in the storm for others, right? And so we have so many amazing examples. Hopefully you've met some in your life, but if not, you can see even, His Holiness Dalai Lama is the perfect example. And there are so many videos of him online. You can watch the way people are when they're around him. There's this innate sense of him just wanting you to be happy, right? And that might mean he makes a joke at your behalf, or it might mean that he just sits there in calmness and he radiates that to you. because he's able to recognize what is most appropriate for a different context. That's what we need to embody to the best of our ability. And so that's what this verse is reminding us. This verse is specifically about our actions of speech, but we can take that and use it to apply to all of our activities. We shouldn't allow any of our activities to be motivated from an affliction, especially the afflictions of desire or hatred, which are the strongest root afflictions. We should always have them to be motivated with the wish to bring others happiness and joy. Even if we're critiquing someone, even if we're correcting someone, if someone makes a mistake and we want to correct them, we shouldn't correct them because we want to show that we know more than them. We should correct them because we want them to not continue to cause their own unhappiness or their own failure or their own distress. And that means being aware of what's the appropriate way to correct them, doing it in private instead of in public, doing it with kind words instead of with critical words, right? We need to be aware of how we can say things to others that may not be what they want to hear, right? Tough love is like a thing, it exists. We can do that, but we have to be smart about how we do it. We have to be smart about our motivation because we want to embody the way of being in the world that serves as a beacon of peace and comfort and happiness for others. And by doing so, by improving our minds, by cultivating a sense of introspection and allowing that to always observe what is our motivation and then adjust our behavior accordingly, that is how we become that.
Venerable, I have
Yes.
a question. Could it be that you spoke about your teacher and how you, even without speaking, you felt held by him? But could
Mm.
it be because it is because you have accumulated so much merit, you are already, well, as compared to so many of us, so well along the path, and maybe someone like me, let's say, who is more ignorant and more stupid, might be in the presence of someone like a great being like that and not feel anything at all. And it could be my karma to be, or like the way I am, that is not picking up his.
Mhm.
Could that be?
Well, first off, I will push back against you referring to yourself as more ignorant and more stupid. I don't think that's the case, but I understand what you're saying. Definitely, we not only, I mean, I've cultivated a relationship with him from knowing him for many years. Even that makes it a different circumstance. But as you say, our own karma and our own past activities make us more or less receptive, right? That's true. But the we know, I mean, if that wasn't the case, then everyone would totally love the Dalai Lama, and you wouldn't have a whole government that calls him a demon and says that he has horns and all these things, right? We know that. Um, so it comes from both sides. You're correct. But we can't control others' experience. What we can do is try to be the source of happiness and joy and calm and comfort for them. And in the same time, by doing that, what we're doing is opening ourselves up to receive that from others. So you can be in the presence of someone who's a great being, and you may be in their presence now and not feel any emotional or not feel that emotional connection. And then after meditating for a year or practicing for a year or whatever, you may be around them again, and all of a sudden something else comes to you. And it's not because they've changed, but because you've changed. Because as we said in the beginning of today's class, the Dharma meets us where we are, right? As our practice deepens, we learn more about ourselves. And as we learn more about ourselves, we open our hearts up more to receive the blessings of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas that are always being given to us, right? So it's correct what you say that not everyone is going to receive or interact with a single person in the same way due to their own obstacles, their own imprints, their own set of predispositions. That's true. But we can't control others' predispositions. All we can control is our own and how we exist in the world. So those we have to work on. And just because someone's a monk or an abbot or any of these things doesn't mean that they're a holy or a great person. Like that, we know that for an unfortunate truth. So we shouldn't just assume that if you're around a monk or a nun or an abbot or whatever, an exalted person in that way, and if you don't feel that connection, that there's something wrong with you. You shouldn't just assume that, but you should say, okay, am I closed off to this, to an experience, and why? What is it that is closing me off, and what can I do to slowly break down those walls? And maybe there's nothing from my side, that's the obstacle. Maybe it's from their side, but who knows, right? So you have to do both of these things at once. Constantly working on your mind, constantly looking at where am I where am I closing myself off from receiving the benefit of other sentient beings? Not just exalted great beings, but even ordinary beings, right? How many times have um, you been around like small children that weren't your children, weren't related to you, but just being around them made you happy? Even like, I have the luxury and joy of not having children to care for. And as a result of that, um, it actually, for me, has made me much more compassionate and patient with children because I can see children freaking out and like going through fits, and I see the parents struggling to, navigate how do I deal with this in this situation. And for me, it just makes me feel more compassion for them, right? But so like I've been on an airplane traveling back and forth from the US to India, and you have like that infant crying. And then you see the parents desperately wanting the infant not to cry anymore, not only because they don't want the infant to be unhappy, but because they don't want the whole plane to be mad at them for the infant crying. And for me, I have the luck, since I have never had to experience that myself, being the one in charge of that infant, it just ignites nothing but happiness in me, right? Compassion, because I see them living a type of humanity and doing their best to find happiness for their children and for those around them, right? Um, anyway, that's a diversion. I've gotten off topic. The point is, it doesn't have to be great people or great beings. You can be around others and just feel delight, right? And that's especially true. I mean, my dogs bring me delight. My dogs are ridiculous and foolish and selfish and don't care about anything but themselves. And yet seeing them brings delight to my mind, right? It makes me happier to be around them. Okay. And so they don't do that on purpose. That's just the way they are. But I've opened myself up to receive that because I see how they are in the world, and it makes me happy. And so we can open ourselves up to receive that joy, that blessing, that peace, that calm from others, right? So that's a practice we can do to try to make ourselves receptive to that. But at the same time, and what this text is showing us, is teaching us about, is it's equally, if not more important, to cultivate that quality of being so we can be that for others. And the truth is, the more we try to cultivate that, the more receptive we are to receiving it in others. It's not an innate thing. Sometimes it may be. We may have imprints from past lives. If I knew someone over and over and over again, I was someone's student in a past life, then in this life, I might see them and right away have a connection. Like that's possible, right? But I can't control that. That's useful to know, but it isn't something it's not actionable, right? Because I can't do anything to control it. What I can do is I can try to make myself as receptive to the sense of joy that exists in other people's minds. And I can try to cultivate a sense of peace, of calm, of relaxation. I can try to be a beacon of hope and joy and light for others. And in doing that, and not pretending, but actually trying to cultivate those qualities in such a way that I can serve as that sense of joy for others, then I'm opening myself up to receive that from others as well. Because that's part of the process. Because in order to be that peace in the world, I have to tame my mind. I have to overcome my own ignorance, my own self-cherishing, my own self-grasping, my own pride, my own ego. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's not like a light switch that one day it's there and one day it's not. It's a gradual process. Okay. So it's not something we can expect that you just gonna one day you'll turn on the light and it'll be there. No, it's a gradual process that I lean into being the peace I want to see in the world. And as a result of that, I can experience contentment and peace and joy from others as well.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Venerable.
Yeah. I don't know. We see. We do the best we can, right? It's all we can do. Samsara is really hard. It's really, really hard. So we do the best we can do. We're so fortunate to have teachings like Shantideva and to have communities like CKSL that help us go through these teachings together. That, you know, um, yeah, we do the best we can do with whatever resources we have available to us. That's all we can do, right? Let's continue.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Sorry, I think there is a question in the chat by Nivedita. So I don't know whether she wants to personally ask it or I can read it out.
You can go ahead and read it. I can't see the chat, so go ahead.
Yeah, Nivedita says, often in love, we get very attached to that person and get
Mm.
dependent on that person. So how to come out of that to love someone without getting attached? Is it possible?
Mm. It is possible. It's difficult. right? Most of what we call love in the contemporary sense of the word, or the worldly sense of the word, is mostly attachment and mixed with love. Love is the wish for others to have happiness and the causes of happiness. And we have to try to cultivate that mind for all sentient beings equally, not just those that we're attached to. So when you're in a romantic relationship with someone, um, for most of us, that first moment, the beginning of that romantic relationship, is definitely attachment and lust mixed with actual love. And the truth is, we have to try to find a way to separate those two things. And if you're a layperson and in a romantic relationship, it's okay to have sexual attraction and to have joy in that part of your relationship, right? It wouldn't be appropriate for someone like a monk, but it would be appropriate for a layperson in a healthy in a healthy romantic relationship. That's not the same thing as love. They may be simultaneous, they may occur at the same time, but don't get them mixed up. That's the important thing. You can love someone without having that attachment, without expecting them to give you something back, without expecting physical gratification, without expecting any of those things, without tying your happiness to them. You can still love them. And that love is the wish for them to be happy. It's that love is the wish for them to have all the causes of happiness, regardless of what that means for you, right? So love is a selfless thing. Lust and attachment are entirely selfish. And the problem is we intertwine the two together and then assume it's one thing and we call it love, but it's not. So it's difficult, right? And attachment is really difficult to overcome. And there is a utility in having some sense of romantic attachment to your partner if you're in a committed relationship with someone, a healthy committed relationship. There is a utility for lay people to have that. But you can have that, recognize the joy that may bring to you, right? Being in a romantic relationship and having that sense of attraction and having the joy of physicality that you have in a romantic partnership, you can appreciate that without being attached to it, without letting that impede your ability to wish for them to be happy, to wish for their success in all aspects of their life, regardless of what that means for you. So um, that's what you have to try to do, is to separate those two things and then cultivate one and then let the other not overwhelm, you know? I don't know. I hope that helps. It's difficult though. And the most important thing is to separate them and to recognize they're not the same thing. It's similar when, you know, I think, I have spent my life doing social justice advocacy work and trying to help victims of oppression, whatever it may be, and trying to make sure that people that are part of marginalized or oppressed communities aren't treated poorly and have equal rights. And so when I see people being abused or experiencing violence, it sparks a sense of outrage in me. But I've worked hard to try to cultivate a distinction between outrage and anger because anger going to be beneficial. Anger is never going to solve any problems. All it's going to do is pour gasoline on fires, both in the short term and the long term. And this idea that such a thing exists as righteous anger or helpful anger or valuable anger is never accurate, right? It may feel that way. It feels really good to be angry when you see someone causing harm, but it's not helpful. It doesn't actually solve a problem in any real sense. Outrage, however, the sense of not wanting to see someone experience injustice and feeling a need to do everything you can to prevent their experience of suffering at the hands of injustice. That we mix it with anger and we call it a justified anger. But we can separate them because that outrage is really a type of compassion, a fierce type of compassion that sees someone suffering and doesn't want them to suffer. Anger isn't focusing on the person who's suffering, it's focusing on the person causing the harm and wishing harm against them. There's a difference, right? One of those is focused on the victim and one is focused on the victimizer. And it's not useful to have anger. It is useful, or it can be useful, to cultivate outrage. It can motivate you to act out of compassion. But what we do is we mix those two things up. And we see them as one thing. And therefore we justify our leaning into anger, right? So it's the same thing, trying to separate love and attachment and recognize that love is not something that needs to be mixed with attachment. And we can separate anger from outrage and recognize that we can be outraged at injustice and suffering and not have it be mixed with anger. But due to conventional language and due to the way we're taught and due to our habits, we're constantly mixing those things together and assuming they're one thing. So part of the practice of looking at our minds is really analyzing what are the different emotional aspects that are being raised right now? What are the different mental factors that I am cultivating and are causing me to act in such a way? And can I separate them? into maybe more complicated than they seem at first blush, you know? So it's difficult to distinguish romantic love and lust attachment and then actual love. But we can do it. It's a practice. It's something we do slowly. And you'll find that the more you're able to do it, that your love for them actually will grow. Your love will increase when it no longer is tied down by the expectations of your attachment. Because your love, whatever love you can cultivate for someone, is bound by attachment. Attachment hinders your capacity to love fully. So by getting rid of attachment and separating out your attachment from your love can become more magnificent as a result. Okay, let's try to get through this section. I think we're on verse 80 now. When beholding someone with my eyes, thinking I shall fully awaken through depending upon this being, I shall look upon them with an open heart and love. Very convenient for for the question we just talked about. Because this is showing us that we need to look at all sentient beings as the opportunity and the cause for us to become Buddhas, right? All sentient beings serve as the cause for us to develop our own minds. And therefore, we have to have love and compassion and open hearts toward all sentient beings, not just the ones that are favorable to us, not just the ones that we, come from our country or from our religion or from our background, not just the ones that are nice to us. We have to develop a sense of love and compassion for all sentient beings equally. You know, great compassion, which is the precursor to bodhicitta, and bodhicitta as well. They're impartial, right? Bodhicitta says, I want to become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. All sentient beings. I want to remove the suffering of every single sentient being, not just the sentient beings that are kind to me, not just the sentient beings that speak the same language as me, or have the same education as me, or come from the same country as me, or are nice to me. That's hard, right? It's very difficult. But Buddhas are completely impartial, as are, and Bodhisattvas, the bodhicitta itself, is completely impartial. And so, whenever we observe any other sentient being, we should recognize that in order for us to develop compassion, we have to observe the suffering of others. That's what compassion is, the wish for others to be free from suffering and the cause of suffering. So therefore, we can only develop compassion in relation to other sentient beings, right? So when we see a sentient being, they become one of the causes for us to become Buddhas, because it is dependent upon them that we're able to cultivate a mind of compassion. Without a mind of compassion, we can't develop bodhicitta. Without bodhicitta, we can't become Buddhas. So whenever we see any sentient being, we should say to ourselves, it is through this being that I'm able to become Buddha. Not conceptually, not hypothetically, specifically. This sentient being in front of me right now is one of the causes for my Buddhahood, or one of the conditions for my Buddhahood, my eventual Buddhahood. And by having that attitude, it totally changes the way that you relate to others, right? And it doesn't mean that we're like obsequious to them, that we give in to their demands, that we do whatever they want, that we let them go around acting in harmful ways. That's not that, right? It's just recognizing that our happiness is dependent on the happiness of all of the sentient beings. Our well-being, our emotional stability, our eventual Buddhahood, which is a state of permanent bliss, right? Unchanging permanent bliss is what it means to be a Buddha. That is dependent upon other sentient beings. Because we can't develop compassion, we can't develop bodhicitta if we don't have other sentient beings. Um, Again, this doesn't mean give in to their demands. It doesn't mean let them walk all over you. I think I mentioned earlier, tough love, whatever we want to mean by that, that does exist. When you love someone and you see them engaging in harmful actions, it's appropriate to try to prevent them from continuing those harmful actions. But you have to do so in a way that is going to be well received and that is not about you. That's the important thing. When you're acting uh, so-called tough love, you know, is it because you feel offended at the way they're acting and you want to show that you know a better way to act, or is it actually out of care for them? So you have to check your motivation. But recognizing that all sentient beings deserve your love and compassion, and that they are the causes, or they are participating as causes for your eventual Buddhahood, that doesn't mean just letting them do whatever they want. So you have to find that balance. So continuing, finishing off this section. Always being motivated by great aspiration or being motivated by the remedial forces, I work in the fields of excellence, benefit, and misery. Great virtues will come about. So what this is saying is that we should always practice generosity. And if we practice generosity out of a mind of the great aspiration, being the bodhicitta, or the remedial forces, being any of the minds that are trying to combat the afflictions, then that makes our virtue stronger. And here it's talking about the fields of excellence, benefit, and misery. So these are the fields against which we practice generosity. So the objects against which. So the field of excellence or the field of good qualities is to say that we should practice generosity towards the triple gem, towards the Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, and to our teachers, right? The field of benefit means that we should practice generosity towards those who are especially kind and influential in our life, such as our parents. And the field of misery is we should are those people who are experiencing gross types of the suffering of suffering, whether it be destitution or poverty or illness and so forth. So those three objects, people that are experiencing really overwhelming suffering of suffering, people who have been especially kind to us, such as our parents, and the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and the Triple Gem, are uncommon sources, or rather uncommon objects for our generosity. And when we engage in acts of generosity toward them, out of a mind of bodhicitta or a mind of um, any of the antidotes to the afflictions, then that virtue is most powerful. So we know that virtuous activity and not non-virtue as well, it can be powerful, more powerful or less powerful depending on the object, right? So making an offering to certain types of beings makes it more virtuous or less. So, you know, if you have a good friend that just wants to go to the bar and doesn't have enough money, so you loan them, 500 rupees so they can go to the bar and drink, maybe, or give them rather, let's not say loan them, you give them 500 rupees so they can go do that. You're engaging in an act of generosity. Maybe you definitely want them to be happy, right? Maybe that is your motivation, but they aren't, first off, they aren't one of these three fields. And second off, what they're using that money for, if they're just going to engage in seeking out worldly pleasure, neither that also isn't necessarily virtuous. So your act of generosity is generosity, but it's not very strong, right? Whereas your act of generosity can be more powerful and accumulate more merit, be more virtuous if it is directed at one of these three fields. Again, field meaning a place that something is cultivated, right? We call it the merit field. We call, the field, all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas that we make offerings to, we call the merit field, because it's by making offerings to them that we cultivate the sprouts and the trees of merit, of good qualities. So these three fields, the excellent field, the field of benefit, and the field of misery, are uncommon sources of great virtue when we use them as objects of our generosity.
Sorry, Venerable, can I ask a question?
Sure.
But isn't that being selfish? I mean, let's say I have 500 rupees and I can either put it in the drop box at the center, or I can give it to a poor person. And so I look at that 500 rupees and say, hey, I want more benefit for myself by this act of giving. So let me give it to the center. Doesn't matter if this man is starving on the road. That's fine. I look after my own interests. The center will of course benefit
Yeah,
from
yeah.
my
So
500
then,
rupees, but maybe that man will benefit more.
So then when it's that explicit, then you have to look at your motivation. You're no longer engaging in generosity. If that is the motivation and goal, it's not acting out of generosity.
It
It's
is
acting out of wanting something.
generosity because I'm
Not if you're
willing to part
the mind
with
of
my
generosity
500 rupees. That's
is
generosity. I'm not going to hold it for myself. I want to give it, but I can decide
but
whom.
generosity is a mind that wishes to give, not to receive benefit, right? So I agree. There is a little bit of a contradiction here, or a little bit of a tension that when we are the perfection of generosity recognizes that there are different objects of generosity that are more powerful than others. And if we're only seeking out those, then it can be that we are seeking out only our own benefit, right? It can seem that way. I appreciate your position, what you're saying. But if you actually have the mindset that says, well, I have 500 rupees to give. I can either give it to the center or to this person on the street. I want more benefit for me. Therefore, I'm going to choose X instead of Y. Then it's no longer concerned with the object of your giving. So it's no longer an actual pure act of generosity. It's an act of seeking out your own benefit. Whereas you can recognize that if your motivation is pure, then whatever is the purest act is going to be more beneficial. So here, in this case, in the specific example you gave, both of those objects, so the center being a representation of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and this person on the street, we would say is a field of misery. Those are both equally powerful objects, or they have the potential to be equally powerful, especially if you have a genuine wish for their happiness, right? So that's different than giving money to a friend of yours who maybe doesn't need the money, but just is short of cash or something like this, right? So in the specific example you gave, both of those objects are powerful objects of offering or of making an offering. Most important, though, regardless, most important is to look at your motivation. And if the only reason you make an offering at the center or to a teacher or like this is because you want some benefit, then that's not a very useful offering. It's better to give that offering to a person on the street. But if the only reason you're giving an offering to a person on the street is because you want to then you want to then be able to tell people, hey, I give money to poor people, or because you want to say, hey, I'm a good person, look at all these things I do, then that's also not a lot of benefit to you. It may offer worldly benefit to them, but it's not benefiting your mind. So the important thing of generosity, the action of generosity, right? The giving is the least important part because generosity is a type of mind, and that mind has to have virtuous motivation. So you should always examine your motivation. And if you genuinely feel that this offering can be better served in the immediate sense by making it to this person on the street than making it to the center, then that's an appropriate thing to do. But if you're only doing it for your own ends, not because you recognize it being more beneficial either with A or with B, then that is something you have to investigate.
Okay, I get it. Thank you. Yeah,
But
yeah.
but you are correct. You are correct that when a teaching says, "Hey, it's more virtuous to give here than it is to give there," then your first thought is, "Well, I want more virtue, therefore I'm going to give here instead of there." But then by doing that, am I only focusing on myself or am I focusing on others? I agree. It's not easy, right? It's trying to hold a few things at once. That we can recognize something to be more virtuous, but that doesn't mean that we're doing it for our own benefit alone. So your position, I understand the what you bring up is important because by highlighting something being more virtuous in this circumstance than this, it seems to lend itself towards seeking out my benefit alone. I agree that those teachings do that. So these teachings instead are just showing us the whole array of ways of engaging in virtuous activity that are most beneficial. But by doing that, we should always be cognizant that the reason we're seeking these out, these beneficial activities, aren't simply for my own personal gain, but so that I can help others to the best of my capacity. And the reason in this example, for instance, that these three objects are greater virtue is because they're the ones that can use that offering in the most beneficial way. So making an offering to these objects is more powerful, not for my benefit, but for theirs. Um, but I appreciate what you said. It's a constant practice to try to balance, you know, am I only doing this because I want more virtue, or am I doing it because I really want to help others? And I recognize that by accumulating virtue and working towards Buddhahood gives me a greater capacity to help others. Like it's a fine line, and it's easy to fool ourselves and trip over it. So we just have to be careful. We have to constantly be analyzing our mind, right? It's a
Yes.
good question, though. It's a very good question. Um, okay, let's finish these last two verses quickly, because then we'll have finished this whole section, and then we'll see if there's any time for questions. This next verse, 82, I should say that there's a mistake. So the word joy here, it should be faith. And that's because in Tibetan, the words for joy and faith are very similar. And it seems like it's a scribal error because all the commentaries treat this as if it were the word faith, not joy. Um, so we're just going to assume that it says faith. Endowed with wisdom and faith, I should undertake all that I do. I need not depend upon anyone else in any action that I undertake. The perfections, such as generosity, are progressively more exalted, but for a little, such as morality, I should not forsake a great gift. Principally, I should consider what will be of most benefit for others. So what 82 is saying is that we need to rely on ourselves to generate virtue, right? So everything I do, I should bring the sense of faith in the teachings of the Buddha and the wisdom that is able to understand what is beneficial and what is harmful. I take those two things together and allow that to motivate all my activities. What is appropriate to adopt, what is appropriate to abandon, and confidence that the teachings that I've received from my teachers and that come from the Buddha are appropriate explanations of what is appropriate to adopt and abandon. And with that as motivating factor, then I don't depend on others to engage in good actions. I do it myself. So, for as an example, if I want to um, make an offering, let's say, then I don't tell someone else to do it on my behalf if I don't have to. Sometimes we're in circumstances where we can't do things on our own. But if we can do it, we should always rely upon ourselves to develop virtue. We shouldn't be expecting others to do it for us. you know, in the same way that we shouldn't expect our teachers to give us their insight because they can't give us our insight. All they can do is show us the path that we walk on to develop insight, develop realizations, to develop good qualities on our own. So this is saying that I have to have the right motivation. That's the combination of faith in the teachings and in my teachers, along with the wisdom that they impart. I use that motivation to then seek out virtue and to make sure that I am willing to do the work to cultivate virtue on myself. And I don't depend on others for that virtue. I depend on myself to cultivate virtue. And that way I can make seeking out virtue the core practice that I do. Everything I do can be revolving around seeking out virtuous activity and avoiding non-virtuous activity. So part of the way, another way this is interpreted is when I say I don't depend on others, when I'm trying to seek out virtue, it means that one example, for instance, is if I need advice on how to meditate, I don't go to 3 or 4 different teachers and then choose the one that I think is the best. You know, I either ask my one teacher for advice, and then once they give me advice, I don't keep saying, well, what about this? What about this? I take their advice and I practice it. So if I'm in retreat and I want to do a retreat on emptiness, or let's say I want to do a retreat on perfect human rebirth, and then I say, well, maybe I should do a retreat on impermanence instead. I don't need to go and ask that very specific question to my teacher because I already understand the teachings well enough to understand what it means to do a retreat on impermanence, what it means to do a retreat on perfect human rebirth, and I have all the tools I need to do either of those retreats. And I recognize they're both beneficial. So I don't need to depend on someone else for every single minute detail of my life and my practice. Because my teachers, I have faith in the teachings and I have faith and confidence that my direct teachers have taught the teachings of the Buddha in such a way that I understand them. And therefore, I don't need everything in my life micromanaged. If my goal is to accumulate virtue. When I have genuine doubts, when I really don't know what to do, then of course I go to a teacher. If we want to become Buddha, we need to rely on teachers. That's incredibly important. Yet, I also have to have confidence in myself. I have to have confidence that I'm doing the best I can, that I study the teachings, I put them into practice, I do meditate, and I'm not perfect, but I have a good idea of what's going on, and I understand the distinction between right and wrong, and so I don't have to be micromanaged, that I can do this work on my own. I have the confidence in my own practice, in my own mind, in the own progress I've made, right? So this isn't saying don't rely upon teachers. It's not saying that you can go alone and you don't need anyone else in your life, but it's saying that we are responsible for our own virtuous activity. And so we have to hold that responsibility and hold it, karesana. Be cognizant of it in such a way that we don't shunt that responsibility to others, right? That I would be more virtuous if I had more help from others, if you gave me better guidance, if I had the right teacher give me the right advice, then I would behave in an appropriate way. But if I don't have that, how can I be expected to? That is not a useful way to think. What's useful is to say, I have confidence in what I've learned, even if I still have more to learn. I know I do, but I have confidence that I know the right thing to do in this circumstance. And so therefore, it's my responsibility to accumulate virtue. It's my responsibility to help others the best I can using whatever resources I have. That means intellectual, emotional, and physical resources, all those things. And I know that I can make good decisions in my life. They may not be the perfect decisions, but they're good decisions. So I have confidence in that. And then When I'm definitely overwhelmed or I'm definitely confused, I rely on others. I can ask questions. That's the whole point of having a community, right? Is to have others help you. So this isn't saying don't ask for help when you need help, but it's saying be confident in yourself and confident that you are on the right path. As long as you are working towards Buddhahood, as long as you are always seeking out virtue, be confident that you are moving in the right direction. And don't, um, you know, don't compartmentalize or don't micromanage, or excuse me, don't delegate your virtuous actions to others. That's what I mean. Do them yourself because you have the capacity to, and you have the intellect, and you have the experience, and you have the practice to. Um, and then finishing with this last verse, which is it could be a little bit confusing, but so we say the six perfections are more powerful as they progress, right? So the perfection of generosity is not quite as powerful as the perfection of moral discipline, which is not quite as powerful as the perfection of patience, and so on, up through wisdom, right? So first off, it's saying don't sacrifice a greater practice for a smaller practice. Um, in our life, like an example would be don't engage in something harmful because you think it'll be benefit in another way. So for instance, don't kill a mouse to feed a cat, right? Because the action of killing is a greater harm than feeding the cat. Okay? So don't engage in that kind of non-virtue because it is going to offer some benefit, a worldly benefit like that. Or, if you see someone, if you see a impoverished person on the street and you give them the last money you have, and then you have to, ride the bus illegally or steal a piece of fruit for yourself to eat, well, then you may have tried to engage in generosity, but then as a result, you had to steal. So don't give up one for the other, right? Is what this is saying. Um, Always your activity, your actions of body, speech, and mind should be done to maximize the benefit for all sentient beings, but recognize that sacrificing something greater for something smaller is not a way forward. So another example, maybe more relative to us than killing animals and feeding them to other animals. Well, to be fair, I don't know about any of you, but I know people that have owned animals that required them. Like I know people that own snakes and they had to then um, feed them mice. I know people that owned lizards. They had to feed them crickets and worms and things like this. So they had to kill animals in order to feed their pets. So we say that's not appropriate. But another example that may be more relatable is if there's a chance to attend a teaching, or you say, you know what, I've already studied that topic. I'm just going to stay home and meditate on my own. I don't need to attend that teaching. Then you're sacrificing the greater for the smaller. And your own meditation practice is important, but in general, to receive a teaching is more important because to receive a teaching is offering you something that you won't get out of your practice. Now, if you're in a long-term retreat or something like this, okay, there are uh, exceptions, okay? But as a general rule, if you have the opportunity to receive a teaching, be part of a community, to receive a teacher explain a text or explain a topic or explain a meditation practice in a direct and insightful way, or you have the opportunity to say, you know what, I'm just gonna do my own thing. It's gonna be Buddhist, but it's I don't need to be there. Then you're sacrificing the great for the small. And what you may be doing may be virtuous, right? That's not denying that, but you're sacrificing an opportunity for something more powerful, for something less. So this verse is saying, don't do that. Don't give up the great for the sake of the little. So this is saying, um, here, for a little, the way they interpret this morality and this gift is added in. But so it's saying, when you have the opportunity to practice one of the higher perfections, if it contradicts with your morality, you shouldn't sacrifice it. Um, it's hard to think of examples of this for ordinary people. But for instance, as a monk, if someone makes an offering to me, and this is again, you have to remember that this text was taught to a group of monks. When Shantideva first composed this, he spoke it to an audience that was entirely composed of monks. So when someone makes an offering to a monk, um, to receive that offering, it is inappropriate to deny an offering, to deny a layperson the opportunity to accumulate virtue by making an offering to you. There are only very, very select circumstances where you can deny an offering, such as if you know that offering has been stolen, or you know that the offering is corrupted in some way, right? There are very select circumstances. Otherwise, it's our responsibility, both as ordained people and also as people who have bodhisattva vows, to receive any gifts with an open heart and with gratitude, right? So that may be somehow disrupting our practice of morality, to be receiving gifts from others. That may be what this is pointing at. Things like this, where you have to then, you can't refuse someone a gift because you say it breaks my sense of morality, or my ethical discipline. You're denying them the opportunity to accumulate merit because you're trying to protect something else. And so you always have to find a balance. For me, what this verse is reminding us is that what I say all the time: nothing is easy in samsara. As long as you're in samsara, you're going to have to make choices that are going to be a rock and a hard place. And you're going to have to say, what is the best I can do in this circumstance? What is the way I can use my practice, my understanding, my realizations, whatever, however meager they may be, to do the best thing I can in this circumstance? And it may not be the same response I have if I were to meet the same circumstances in a month. That's fine. What do I have available to me now to make the best choice I can? And it may not be a perfect choice because quite often I don't have a perfect choice available to me. So I do the best with what I have. And this is what this verse is reminding us, that we should always seek out whatever is the most virtuous and the most appropriate, given what we have as resources available to us. So to maximize the benefit from all sentient beings, not just for ourselves, but for everyone else. That is what this is reminding us. And with that, we end this section, which is the morality of accumulating virtue, right? So when you review this text on your own, it's important to remind yourself that everything we covered today, so from verse 71 through verse 83, all fall under the category of how to perfect or practice the morality of collecting virtuous activity. So all these are about how do we seek out virtue in a meaningful way? How do we practice that particular type of morality? And this isn't exhaustive, right? There are other ways to do it, but this is pointing us in that direction. We understand the context for it, and it makes our understanding of the text and our then ability to apply the text to our life more meaningful. So I'm going to end there. If we have any questions, we can ask them now. Otherwise, we can offer dedication and finish.
Venerable Lakme has a question.
Okay, sure, go for it. You're muted.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Okay. This is regarding the offering, forces a gift. I don't know, it could be irrelevant, but I just wanted to ask. I get invited for a meal regularly by a certain family, and I feel a little obligated to say yes all the time. So sometimes I say, no, I have other plans and things. So can you just help me, please?
So from your side, you have to, first off, it's important not to lie. So if you don't actually have other plans, to say that you do is a little bit, you're on shaky ground there. So if you do have to deny for whatever reason, then you have to try to be honest about it. And so maybe you can make other plans before they invite you, and then you wouldn't be lying. That's maybe a possibility, but you should never lie. That's the first thing, right? Because that's not going to be virtuous. Yeah, it's hard. You have to know what their motivation is, and you have to try to balance. Like, if you continually accepting this invitation is causing you emotional distress, then you have to maybe just be honest with them and say, I'm sorry. I don't have the resource. I don't have like the mind frame to attend dinner right now. I apologize. It's not you. I just don't have, the fortitude for it, however you want to explain it. And you have to kind of be honest about that. But it's okay in this regard to say no on occasion because you need to take care of yourself. And if attending this dinner or whatever it may be is going to cause you distress in some way, then it's important to overcome that. So it's appropriate to say no to things that are going to cause harm to you. And now, again, receiving dinner and a dinner invite, to call it harm is like maybe a very strong label, but you know what I mean, right? Anything that is causing some sort of emotional distress to you or causing an obstacle to your practice in a meaningful way, it's appropriate. You don't have to take obstacles on. There are enough obstacles in samsara that I don't have to seek them out. Okay. So if someone's offering me an obstacle and that's all it is, I don't have to grab it with both hands. But at the same time, I can look at that as an opportunity to develop patience, to develop practice, to develop loving kindness. And so I can say that this isn't something I want to do necessarily, but the reason I don't want to do it is because my self-cherishing mind wants me to be able to stay alone by myself and to not seek out company, or so forth, whatever the reason may be. I know that I have a really hard time accepting invitations out with friends, with people I care about, people that I like spending time with. They offer me to say, hey, come out to dinner with us. And I think I could go out to dinner with them, or I could stay in my room and read a book. What are those two things do I want to do? And almost always my instinct is I want to stay and read a book, not because I don't want to spend time with them, but because I have a self-cherishing mind that says this is easier for me and I'm lazy and this is more preferable. But then when I break out of that and I go spend time with them, I'm like, oh, I'm glad I spent time with them. These are my friends. I care about them, right? Now, I know that's not your circumstance, but that's something I've experienced in my life, right? So sometimes you have to just be willing to accept discomfort, to recognize that discomfort is an opportunity for you to grow and for you to improve your mind. But other times that discomfort is just discomfort. And you have to say, I can't deal with this discomfort right now. I need to protect myself. And that might mean being honest and saying, I'm sorry, I can't go out to dinner with you this month because for whatever reason, I don't have the emotional resources necessary to go take dinner with you. You have to maybe find a better way to say that. I don't know, depending on them. But try to do it without lying, without being manipulative. And uh, it's difficult, but you have to find that balance. When you can push yourself out of your comfort zone, yeah, go
Their
ahead.
intentions are there. I mean, there is no doubt about that. They love having me around. But
Yeah, then I you have to try to find the balance. I'd say the most important thing is being honest, which can be the most difficult thing, right? But being honest is the most important thing. But that also means being honest with yourself. Like, why do you not want to attend dinner with them? Right? No, you don't have to tell me. I'm just saying. You ask, so why do I not want to attend dinner? Is it because they're boring? Is it because it's just like too much? Is it because I have other things I want to do? Is it because it's the distraction? Be honest about it. And when you have an honest answer, you say, okay, is this a reason to not accept this invitation or not? Like, what is, and it may be, but it's important to be honest, right? To be clear about it. Because when we make decisions, part of the reason that we cycle in samsara over and over again is because we make decisions without realizing the reason we're doing it. Like we're not always clear on our intention, right? We do things mindlessly. That's our habit. So being very clear about things is important. And then, unfortunately, I can't give you an easy answer, but there are different ways you can go about it. The most important thing is to have that open-heartedness and that honesty, and then saying where that leads you. Okay, I
thank
hope
you.
that's a little bit helpful. Sorry, I can't give you an easy answer. It would be really nice if I could. Samsara would be a lot easier if I had all the answers. Clearly, I don't. Okay, maybe we will end there because we've already gone a little late. I hope that's okay. If there are any other questions people have, feel free to email me. My email address is gyaltenlekden@cksl.in. I'm sure Deepti can share that with you. Or save them for next week. And we'll be back next week continuing this text online again. And so I look forward to seeing you all of you next week as well. Let's quickly offer a few dedication prayers. We recognize that by practicing together today, by studying this text, by looking at our minds, by trying to develop a sense of introspection and an ability to observe why it is we go about living in the world the way we do, we have cultivated some virtue, some good merit. And instead of trying to keep that merit for ourselves, we develop the mind that wishes to dedicate that merit to other sentient beings, the wish that that merit might ripen in other sentient beings' experience of happiness and freedom from suffering. So we dedicate that merit to others. We especially dedicate that merit to our own achievement of Buddhahood because we recognize that by becoming Buddhas quickly, that'll give us the greatest capacity to be of service to others. And so we generate the wish that our merit ripens in that as well. And so we'll offer these quick dedication prayers. And we will offer the first one, we'll offer them all in English. Just this quick dedication prayer and then the long life prayers for His Holiness. May the supreme jewel of bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow. May that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. Savior of the snowland teachings and transmigratory beings, who makes extremely clear the path that is the unification of emptiness and compassion, to the lotus holder, Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. May the glorious gurus' lives be long and stable. May all beings equally in the extent of space have happiness. May I and others, without exception, accumulate merit and purify negativities. And may we be blessed to quickly attain Buddhahood. Great. Thank you all so much. I appreciate you spending time with me today. Thank you. I hope you have a wonderful Sunday.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Venerable.
Venerable. Thank you
Venerable.
so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Next week also we will be online, everyone. just because we are having a lot of members traveling during the summer heat, and we did not want to have Venerable come during heat peak summer to Bangalore and just meet a few people. So we decided to go online next week. The weekend after that, Venerable will be in Bangalore teaching us. We will send you Madhavi has already sent you the plan on WhatsApp, and I've emailed you all. Kindly follow the schedule, and let's all meet again and again. Please do come to the center. For those who are not, who have never come to the center, please do come to the center and try to attend. The center is kept open, and it's a very, very hard task for the trust to keep the center open and running. It is only kept open for people. So the more you come, the more benefit you get from group practices. Whatever we gain as benefits here, it's 10 times more there in the midst of the thankas and the paintings and the statues and Venerable teaching there, and the Sangha, the lay Sangha there. So please, please come and join us at the center. Thank you all so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dee.